Kang Jin-hyuk operated as a hunter, though he was not one to capture media attention or achieve celebrity status. Holding a modest D-rank classification, his opportunities were limited to minor tasks and the leftovers overlooked by major guilds. He had accepted the grim reality of his environment long ago. Influence determined one's fate, and those lacking it, even hunters, were vulnerable to being crushed. Consequently, upon hearing an unusual noise emanating from his apartment, he investigated and was stunned by the discovery. He found a glimmering, pulsating gateway that opened into an alternate dimension populated by monsters. While the creatures were unaware of him, he realized he could traverse the portal safely. To an individual with no remaining prospects, this phenomenon represented more than just a bizarre and frightening occurrence. It was an opportunity for solitary advancement in a private dungeon. All the monsters and treasures within were available exclusively to him. Without competitors to seize the spoils, Kang Jin-hyuk had at last found a potential path to ascend the ranks. Recognizing he has no prospects to forfeit, he gathers his resolve and crosses the threshold, emerging on the initial level of a dungeon labyrinth. He has minimal time to assess his surroundings before a goblin attacks him from the left. He just manages to avoid a club aimed at his head and quickly retreats back into his attic. The creature appears bewildered, glancing around and striking at nothing. It becomes apparent that the monsters cannot perceive the portal, which also means they are unable to cross over to his location. This realization dismisses his fear. He arms himself with a baseball bat and re-enters the portal to confront the goblin directly. He strikes the goblin's cheek with the bat, launching the beast backward, and immediately follows with a thrust to its torso. After the goblin is down, he lifts his bat and brings it down on the creature's face, finishing it off. This marked his first experience hunting monsters solo. Because he was not required to divide the experience points with a party, he received the full amount. Upon the goblin's defeat, his level, which had remained static for 3 years, increased instantly. The goblin's carcass was also his to claim, possessing a potential value of up to 3 million won if sold at the appropriate venues. The following day, he transports it to a hunter's market, attempting to sell it to a vendor. The merchant discerns Jin-hyuk's lack of dungeon experience, noting that his handling of the corpse had substantially lowered its market price. Nonetheless, Jin-hyuk successfully secured an offer exceeding the 3 million won he had anticipated. To receive the payment instantly, he only needed to disclose the location where the goblin was hunted. This was information Jin-hyuk could not share. If the dungeon in his attic were discovered, his potential earnings would evaporate. As he contemplates a solution to the predicament, a team of hunters belonging to the Black Dragon Guild aggressively enters the vicinity. They are agitated because an unauthorized individual poached a kill within their designated territory. Initially, they suspect Jin-hyuk is the culprit and move to challenge him. However, the merchant diverts their focus toward a blonde-haired hunter who seems unaware of the developing conflict. The hunters approach the blonde man to challenge him, proceeding to assault him until he is severely injured and almost immobile. He had infiltrated their domain and attempted to hunt creatures without authorization. They speculate he might even be the serial killer they were seeking. The man, scarcely capable of speech, is then hauled out of the establishment for further questioning. Jin-hyuk realizes that the individual who was violently beaten could very well have been him. Witnessing this altercation and understanding that he cannot plausibly fabricate the origin of his goblin, he reconsiders selling his spoils at that location. He recognizes the necessity of finding an alternative method to liquidate his items, one that avoids confrontations with enforcers from larger guilds and does not endanger his life. Immediately upon returning home, Jin-hyuk resolves to re-enter the dungeon to focus on enhancing his strength. Prior to entering, he must equip himself sufficiently to endure an excursion into such a hazardous environment. He prepares a teleportation stone, enabling an escape from peril back to his apartment, and a monster tracking compass, which identifies any creatures within a 50-meter radius. Equipped with these items and his reliable baseball bat, he enters the dungeon for a session dedicated to gaining levels. He engages in a continuous hunt, with every monster defeated raising his level by 1. The dungeon, aptly named the Goblin Labyrinth, is teeming with goblins. For an individual of his low level, it serves as the ideal location to hunt and cultivate his power. Following an extended period of hunting, his inventory storage is nearly full. He has adequate space remaining for only one more goblin. Given that it is his last catch, he hopes for a larger specimen that would yield a greater profit. His compass indicates a goblin moving toward his position, which is opportune timing. His plan is to conceal himself and launch a surprise attack before the creature notices him. He positions himself around a corner, awaiting the precise moment to strike, then swings his bat toward the target's face. However, the target is not a goblin. He has struck an exceptionally short man. The individual yells at Jinyuk in an unfamiliar dialect that he cannot comprehend. Jinyuk quickly bows as a gesture of apology, an action that appears to somewhat appease the man. The man retrieves 2 necklaces from a pouch and offers one to Jinyuk. The moment Jinyuk wears it, he finds he can understand the man's speech, leading him to 2 realizations. The first realization is that this person is furious with him, which is understandable given that Jinyuk just struck him in the face with a bat. The second realization is that the individual is not a man, but a dwarf, a mythological being he had previously only encountered in works of fantasy. The irate dwarf persists in shouting at Jinyuk as Jinyuk assists in gathering the items that were scattered during the encounter. All the retrieved items appear to be of exceptionally high quality, yet Jinyuk has little opportunity to appreciate them while being berated. The dwarf observes Jinyuk's bat and retrieves it. He insists on knowing its origin, a question that puzzles the young man. The item possesses no remarkable qualities in Jinyuk's view, yet the dwarf is exceptionally persistent in his inquiry. While it is merely a standard aluminum baseball bat, the dwarf appears convinced it is composed of an extremely valuable material known as orichalcum. This common bat holds such immense worth in the dwarf's estimation that he considers it priceless. He proposes an exchange, several of his unique items for the bat. Jinyuk, finding no grounds to decline the offer, accompanies the dwarf back to his workspace. The dwarf carries the bat into the rear of the workshop as Jinyuk surveys the surroundings. Jinyuk observes the various weapons displayed in the area, contemplating which he might choose. However, the dwarf re-emerges shortly thereafter, holding Jinyuk's newly enhanced baseball bat. Inexplicably, the bat is now shining a vivid red and emitting a faint glow. Jinyuk questions if it is truly his original weapon, but the dwarf affirms that this is merely a characteristic of orichalcum. The material begins as a pliable and fragile metal, gradually transforming into a resilient and sturdy substance through successive enchantments. That specific term catches Jinyuk's attention. It appears the dwarf has, by some method, imbued his weapon with an enchantment. Such items are exceedingly scarce, typically only obtained from elite, high-level monsters ranked A grade or higher. Executing a few experimental swings with the modified bat confirms it feels entirely distinct from his memory of it. He finds it difficult to accept that an object of this caliber could be crafted artificially. This dwarf, and indeed the entire dungeon, might represent the significant opportunity he has been seeking this whole time. Jinyuk examines the item's properties via a status menu. The bat has been transformed into a legendary baseball bat, possessing S-grade durability and an automatic retrieval feature. His previously mundane aluminum bat is now a legendary and exceptionally rare piece of equipment. He recognizes that selling the item would yield a massive profit, but the bat has become bound to him, rendering it untradeable. The dwarf included the automatic retrieval enchantment, ensuring that Jinyuk is the only individual capable of wielding it. Ultimately, he cannot profit financially from the bat, though it remains a legendary artifact. Despite this, other avenues for earning income are available to him. His inventory is filled with goblin carcasses ready to be sold. The primary obstacle is the lack of a suitable marketplace where he can sell them without attracting undesirable notice from the major guilds. His remaining alternative is the hunter industry's clandestine black market. These dealers operate discreetly, ask no questions, and handle the processing of monster corpses effectively. Furthermore, contacting them is straightforward. They frequently distribute business cards to lower-ranked hunters in need of funds, meaning Jinyuk already possesses numerous contacts. He returns to his residence and utilizes one of the cards to locate the address for one of these illicit markets. The business card appeared extremely disreputable, yet at that moment he possessed no alternative. As Jinyuk scanned the area for evidence of the market's existence, an individual called out to him from a higher location. The man identified himself as Deputy Cho Hyung-il and extended an invitation for Jinyuk to visit their office and meet the proprietor. There, Jinyuk was introduced to Lee Jun-chul, a predatory lender operating under the guise of a loan agent who was also involved in the illicit trade of monster remains. They requested an examination of the carcasses prior to any discussion of compensation, prompting Jinyuk to retrieve them from his inventory for display. Both men were astonished by the sheer quantity of remains Jinyuk produced. Although Jinyuk was obviously inexperienced, he had successfully acquired 20 goblin carcasses. Furthermore, the specimens were in exceptional shape. While the heads showed damage consistent with blows from a baseball bat, the rest of the bodies were pristine. The quality was so high that Deputy Cho struggled to conceal his enthusiasm about acquiring them. The trio commenced price negotiations, but their discussion was abruptly halted when other black market personnel rushed in, reporting the appearance of a monster nearby. A slight possibility exists for monster remains to lure other creatures, and it appeared that displaying 20 fresh goblin carcasses had served as a potent signal to nearby monsters. Compounding the situation, the creatures that arrived were a pair of orcs, adversaries far beyond Jinyuk's current capabilities. Given the circumstances, his only viable option for survival seemed to be retrieving his carcasses and fleeing immediately. Unfortunately, that opportunity had passed. The initial orc had reached their position and appeared prepared to attack them viciously. As Jinyuk was the sole hunter present, he was the only one with the power to confront the beasts. This did not, however, guarantee he could defeat them. The orc rushed at him, brandishing its battle axe. He evaded the first strike, but the follow-up attack descended directly toward his head. At that proximity, evasion was impossible. It felt as if his end had arrived, fated to be a pathetic demise. This changed when his recently enhanced bat materialized from his inventory, intercepting the blow fractions of a second before impact. The block was so forceful that it knocked the orc backward momentarily. This seemed to indicate another of the bat's enchantments, a presence detection capability. If his new weapon possessed such abilities, he might have a possibility of success. The orc advanced once more, but Jinyuk, now more assured, was prepared. He tightened his grip on the bat and struck downward at the orc's knee, destabilizing the creature. With the monster unbalanced, he delivered a subsequent blow to its face, fracturing its neck and dispatching it instantly. Defeating just one orc resulted in his level rapidly ascending from 24 to 36. He had no time to acknowledge this achievement, as the second orc located them and initiated its own attack. This time, however, he was prepared. He sidestepped the assault, moved to the creature's rear, and struck its back forcefully with the bat. He then shifted his position and delivered a final lethal strike to its head, terminating it immediately. In this manner, Jinyuk successfully dispatched 2 orcs with ease in just a few moments. This feat highlighted the true potency of his enchanted weapon. With the confrontation resolved, he confidently advised the men to restart their negotiations, stipulating that the carcasses of the 2 defeated orcs must now be included in the transaction. That day, he departed with a sense of accomplishment. He had effectively negotiated a payment 15% higher than the prevailing market price from the dealers. The sum of money now in his bank account felt almost surreal. Having finally managed the sale of the goblin corpses, his complete attention could return to hunting. Because he had protected the black market dealer and his associates, they agreed to a continued business arrangement. This meant Jinyuk would no longer need to worry about finding a venue to sell his monster remains. This decision was likely made because the dealer recognized Jinyuk was not a simple, low-level thief selling stolen goods. Instead, he was clearly a high-caliber hunter, capable of eliminating 2 orcs with minimal effort. However, even with his enchanted bat and his newfound prowess, his current set of equipment was inadequate for hunting higher-grade monsters. Only one option remained for him to obtain an upgrade, and if he managed the situation adeptly, he might even acquire the equipment at no cost. The following day, he acquired a large case filled with beer cans and other alcohol as an offering for the dwarf. Given the dwarf's intense appreciation for aluminum, which he mistook for orichalcum, this gift was comparable to a chest of treasure. The dwarf was incredulous that the entire crate contained what he perceived as auriculacum. He tasted the beer, but immediately spat it out, finding the flavor disgusting. To pacify the dwarf and avert another tirade, Jinyuk offered him some soju instead. This beverage was different, and its taste proved sufficient to satisfy the dwarf temporarily, though it still seemed to be missing the potency he sought. Seeing an opening, the dwarf assigned a task to Jinyuk. He required a specific material to be mined. He tasked Jinyuk with a quest to excavate mithril ore. The relationship between this ore and the alcohol was not apparent. However, Jinyuk desired free gear and recognized he was not in a position to choose his assignments. If this was the required method to get the equipment, he would comply. He ventured deeper into the labyrinth and eventually entered a clearing within a forest. This new area was considerably larger than he had imagined. A system menu appeared before him, indicating he had successfully reached the second level of the labyrinth. He was then offered the chance to register his location as a warp point. Unfamiliar with the concept, he nonetheless accepted the prompt. This action caused a new portal to open nearby. This gateway enabled him to move between the first and second floors conveniently, similar to a mechanic in a video game. With this new transport system established, Jinyuk pressed further into the labyrinth to search for the mithril ore he had been sent to retrieve. The second level was designated Dogs and Skeletons. In the same manner that the first floor was populated with goblins, this area was filled with feral monster dogs leaping toward him. These creatures were considerably weaker than the orcs Jinyuk had faced a few days prior, which meant they represented an easy source of experience points. He readied his bat and charged directly into an advancing pack of the dogs. By the conclusion of this engagement, he had successfully killed 25 orcs and gathered their remains. According to current market valuations, these corpses were projected to earn him a substantial 200 million won. However, he could not permit the excitement over the potential money to divert his attention. He still had an objective to complete: mining mithril ore. Jinyuk ventured deeper into the dungeon and was subsequently confronted by skeletons. The floor was, after all, named Dogs and Skeletons proved to be a vexing category of monster. Their bodies held no monetary value, and the sole method of defeating them was to shatter their core. This requirement made the combat all the more grueling, particularly given the large quantity of them approaching him. Despite the difficulty, his existing skills and current level ensured he was capable of eliminating them. By the end of the protracted fight, he was exhausted. He came to the realization that the dwarf had likely sent him to this location specifically to avoid dealing with these troublesome monsters himself. Still, a significant benefit resulted from this ordeal. The act of destroying these skeletons had advanced his level to 100, which signified he was now eligible to receive a class change. His class would be determined automatically, based on his previous patterns of action. Given the substantial amount of fighting he had undertaken recently, he fully expected to be classified as a berserker or a warrior. Instead, the system designated him as a cleric. He pressed onward and eventually succeeded in mining the mithril ore that the dwarf had requested. This outcome was surprising, as the dwarf had not anticipated Jinyuk would survive the experience. Jinyuk was indeed alive, but he was depleted from the continuous combat he had endured. Even so, he did not depart from the encounter without securing something for himself. He managed to covertly take a portion of the mithril ore, having noted its expensive appearance, and then delivered the rest to the dwarf. Since Jinyuk had successfully acquired the ore, the dwarf agreed to use some of the material to fabricate any item Jinyuk desired. As he already possessed an excellent weapon, his next requirement was a form of armor that could resist heavy attacks from monsters. He specified a preference for something lightweight and of high quality. The dwarf consented and began the work immediately. The crafting process required more time than Jinyuk could wait. Consequently, he returned to his home to sleep for a few hours. He awoke approximately 6 hours later and went back to the workshop to see the dwarf's progress. By that time, the dwarf had finished crafting the armor and appeared satisfied with his creation. It was a mithril chainmail armor designed to be worn discreetly under his shirt and hoodie. Jinyuk put the armor on, and without warning, the dwarf struck him squarely in the chest with a hammer. The dwarf seemingly believed that a practical demonstration was the most effective method of explanation. An attack of that force would normally have inflicted broken ribs at the very least. However, thanks to the new armor, Jinyuk felt almost nothing. With protective gear this resilient, combined with his legendary baseball bat, his combat effectiveness had risen exponentially. His encounter with the dwarf was undeniably the fortunate event he needed to transform his life. The dwarf had more prepared, however. Next, he presented Jinyuk with a large barrel. It contained the soju Jinyuk had provided earlier. Jinyuk returned to his apartment to sample the beverage. He discovered the dwarf was correct. Merely storing the soju in a cask constructed from mithril ore had altered the drink into something entirely different. This remarkable outcome gave Jinyuk an idea. He contacted the black market dealer again, proposing another business deal. This time, he offered to sell kobold corpses and the exceptional quality liquor. In a different section of the city, the Titan Guild had just completed their training near some newly activated gates. Their exercise should have been finished, but a sudden new wave of lizard men began flooding through the portals. It appeared to be an anomaly gate, disgorging 3 times the number of enemies they had just vanquished. One of the guild members recommended requesting assistance from another guild. However, Doyon, the deputy guild master, possessed too much pride to call others for help. He insisted his subordinates maintain their formation and fight. Jin-hyuk, conversely, was experiencing a much less stressful time. He had just officially registered his class as a cleric, and furthermore, he had been promoted from D rank to C rank. Clerics are a rare healing class, and it is widely known that premier guilds actively recruit them. This implied he might finally be eligible for recruitment by a guild. Suddenly, an injured, blood-covered hunter burst through the doors, desperately searching for a cleric. Jin-hyuk raised his hand, volunteering his services. The man immediately escorted him to the site, where the Titan Guild members were engaged with the Lizardmen hordes. Jin-hyuk was instructed to stay in the rear line with the other clerics and heal as many combatants as possible. He wished to contribute in other ways, but the guild member reiterated that his only duty was to heal from the back, promising he would be compensated accordingly once the battle concluded. The presence of the healers in the area was sufficient to bolster the guild members, giving them a surge of endurance to continue fighting. Nevertheless, the waves of monsters were simply too numerous for them to manage, leading another cleric to suggest calling in a support guild to help dispatch the enemies more quickly. It was clear that if no action was taken, the entire group faced annihilation. Just as Jin-hyuk was considering what to do, he detected a hostile presence approaching from his rear. His bat had just intercepted a lethal strike from one of the lizardmen. The creature had somehow infiltrated past all the hunters and was attempting to eliminate the healers, targeting him first. This meant the rear defenses had been compromised. Only clerics were stationed at the back line. If these monsters managed to get through them, they would overwhelm the guild members in an instant. Left with no alternative, Jin-hyuk gripped his bat and swung it at the lizard man that had attacked him, sending the creature flying with a single impact. He notified the other clerics about the breach, stating that he was the only one who could stop the monsters. The creatures had reached the back line by using a concealment technique and were now attempting an ambush. Jin-hyuk instructed the clerics to maintain their focus on healing and to leave the lizardmen to him. It would be a difficult task, but he was the only one present who could stop their assault. The other clerics were concerned for him, as they believed he was just a conventional healer like themselves. Jin-hyuk, conversely, rushed forward to engage the enemies head-on, assuring the others not to worry. He would not have made such statements if he lacked at least some confidence in his abilities. Of course, despite his assurances, he was still apprehensive about the situation. In the end, however, he successfully held his ground against the rampaging creatures. One of them managed to slip past him while his guard was down and made its way directly toward another cleric. Jin-hyuk gave chase, then leaped through the air, managing to stop the monster just in time to prevent it from attacking the healer. His hurried attack left him vulnerable to a stab from behind, but thanks to the dwarf's chain armor, the blow barely affected him. The monster was stunned that its attack had been ineffective, and Jin-hyuk used that opportunity to counter with a swing of his bat to its face. He was somehow managing to hold them off all by himself. Because of his efforts, the other healers could focus on their duties without fearing a sneak attack. But that was not the only factor shifting in their favor. The lizardmen froze as a new combatant entered the battle. Suddenly, a powerful man joined the fight and eliminated one of the monsters with a single hit. This newcomer was Seo Sang-ho, the guildmaster of the Titan Guild. He acknowledged Jin-hyuk and inquired if he was the one who had dispatched all the monsters in that area. The C-rank hunter admitted that he was responsible for defeating the creatures, though he was more confused about the identity of this powerful new man. The other clerics were surprised that Jin-hyuk did not recognize the S-rank hunter, Sang-ho. He was so formidable that his presence alone signaled that the battle was likely approaching its end. With no time to spare, Sang-ho rushed off to join his subordinates on the front line, but not before promising to reward Jin-hyuk properly for his assistance later. Even from a brief observation, it was apparent to everyone, Jin-hyuk included, that S-rank hunters operated in a completely separate category. When Sang-ho was present, he became the most formidable force in the engagement. He landed directly in the center of the conflict, and his very presence instantly elevated everyone's spirits. This was true for all except Endoyan, who appeared visibly annoyed that the guildmaster had arrived. There was nothing improper about a fellow guild member intervening to provide support, but Endoyan's pride would not allow him to accept the situation gracefully. Sang-ho immediately took command. He issued orders to the combatants, instantly capturing the attention of everyone around him. With that accomplished, he did not wait for the guild members to evacuate the immediate vicinity before he unleashed a powerful attack on the ground. The strike generated a massive shockwave, sending all the lizardmen flying. His single blow was sufficient to eliminate a large number of them in one action. In a matter of minutes, with Sang-ho's participation, all the monsters were easily dispatched. Once he was certain that his guild members were safe, he seized Ndoyen by the jacket to reprimand him. He demanded to know what Ndoyen was thinking when he chose to risk his own life and the lives of his subordinates by engaging the overwhelming force alone. Ndoyen claimed he was only trying to safeguard the guild's reputation, but Sang-ho knew the truth was that Ndoyen sought only to protect his personal pride. The two engaged in a brief, intense stare-down until one of the guild members reminded Sang-ho that he needed to dismiss the clerics who had assisted. The guild master composed himself and went over to address the healers, thanking them personally. He gave special attention to Jin Hyuk, identifying him as the main reason so many people had survived the encounter. As a token of gratitude, Sang-ho offered Jin Hyuk immediate entry into the guild, allowing him to bypass the standard registration process. This was an offer Ndoyen could not accept. He quickly interjected, attempting to disparage Jin Hyuk as a mere D-rank hunter who had only gotten lucky. Sang-ho, in response, did not hesitate to remind his deputy that this mere former D-rank had saved numerous lives, which would have been lost as a direct result of Ndoyen's stubbornness. He then forced Ndoyen to apologize to Jin Hyuk, an action that served as a significant blow to the deputy guildmaster's pride. Even after this, Jin Hyuk respectfully declined the invitation. He expressed that he had no interest in joining any guild that permitted individuals like Ndoyen to hold any type of authority. This was the final straw. Ndoyen rushed at Jin Hyuk with an enhanced punch, but a defensive bat strike directly to his stomach was enough to stop him completely in his tracks. The impact is sufficient to render Ndoyen unconscious instantly. The incident gains so much notoriety that it is featured in a news report by the following day. The leadership within the Titan Guild finds the outcome concerning Ndoyen intolerable. Not only had he been publicly humiliated by a mere C-rank hunter, but he had also been stripped of his authority as deputy guildmaster. They insist that the C-rank individual present himself to them to provide an explanation for his actions. Sang-ho, however, disputes their position. Ndoyen had not only endangered the lives of several guild members due to his pride, but he had also assaulted someone who had fought on the guild's behalf. This constituted more than sufficient grounds for his demotion. This argument effectively silences the assembled individuals. Having no further business with them, he dismisses the men. The guildmaster's thoughts return to the remarkable C-rank hunter he had witnessed recently. He resolves that he must recruit Kang Jin Hyuk into his guild at any cost before the man becomes even more powerful. The man in question, Jin Hyuk, is relaxing in his apartment, enjoying a beverage while reviewing his financial expenditures. As he had earned a significant sum from hunting, his spending had surpassed its usual levels, resulting in absurdly high expenses. Had he anticipated this financial situation, he would have taken the supplementary payment the Titan Guild had offered. Ultimately, however, it is of no consequence, as he possesses a far superior method for generating income. Following a period of necessary rest, he returns to the dungeon to acquire more monster remains. Engaging with the same familiar monsters no longer satisfies him. Having grown more powerful, he now requires more formidable adversaries. He ventures further into the second level than he had previously, and soon finds himself confronting a small legion of orcs. One attempts to ambush him from the rear, but he skillfully evades the strike before launching his own counterattack. The blow vanquishes the orc instantly, just as several others converge on his position in the hallway. Only a few days prior, such an encounter would have meant certain death, but owing to his new gear, he is able to dispatch all of them with ease. By the fight's conclusion, he tallies a total of 20 orc carcasses, which should yield enough profit to keep him financially secure for an entire year. Possessing ample stamina, he opts to proceed slightly deeper into the dungeon, soon finding himself at the entrance to the third floor, titled the Temple Guardian's Labyrinth. On initial inspection, the area appears devoid of monsters, but this sense of tranquility is almost immediately shattered by a powerful tremor shaking the earth. A massive hand erupts from the ground beneath him, and Jinyuk just narrowly manages to get clear of its path. The hand is part of a stone golem, an artificial creature constructed from mana. The golem's attacks are too swift for him to evade, and they carry such force that even a successful block sends him reeling backward a significant distance. This situation leaves him with few alternatives except to try his best to retaliate. The golem appears to be exceptionally strong, yet it lacks the intellect to utilize that strength effectively. Jinyuk exploits this weakness and succeeds in striking its head, breaking it into fragments and causing the creature to collapse. However, it does not take long for the golem to begin regenerating itself. Jin-Yuk had overlooked a critical detail regarding golems. The creature could only be vanquished by shattering its core completely. Upon understanding this, Jin-Yuk attempts to retreat and establish some space to reconsider his strategy. However, the monster regenerates its hand quickly enough to seize him before he can get away. His options for escaping the predicament were limited, but just then, an arrow suddenly flies past and embeds itself in the golem's chest. Jin-Yuk seizes the opening and follows with a precise thrust from his bat, destroying the golem's core and eliminating it permanently. He survived the dangerous situation due to the intervention of the unknown individual who fired the arrow. He pivots to express his gratitude to his rescuer, but is stunned. He does not see the dwarf he was anticipating, but rather a striking woman with unusual-looking ears. These features identify her as an elf. Jin-Yuk inclines his head to thank her for her help, but fails to perceive the elf advancing on him while his head is lowered. He has only a moment to register her presence before she snatches him by the collar, pulling him close to question him. She has never encountered him within this dungeon previously, and is inquisitive about his identity and origin. The elf is obviously not an inhabitant of Jin-Yuk's world. She is unaware of his home, and his attire seems strange to her. She subjects him to a rapid series of inquiries as he attempts to break free from her hold. She finally releases him when he states that he accessed the dungeon that same day. This information implies that he is aware of the dungeon's entrance location. She shoves him to the ground and lets go of her bow, realizing she has at last discovered a path out of this place. Jin-Yuk gets to his feet and asks for an explanation for her unnecessarily hostile behavior. The elf disregards his question and instead insists that he guide her to the exit. He is not pleased with her abruptly issuing commands. However, he notes her attractive appearance and decides to overlook her demeanor for the time being. She states that if he successfully leads her from the dungeon, she will provide him with suitable compensation. She identifies herself as a platinum-ranked mercenary, implying she is trustworthy. Her name is Lucia, a half-elf who considers herself to be quite well known. She seems to expect that he would have heard of her. Jin-Yuk, however, has no comprehension of her claims or her identity. Lucia reiterates her status as a platinum-ranked mercenary and presents her insignia, but Jin-Yuk has no prior knowledge of any of these things. She wonders if he originates from an isolated rural region, questioning how he could be ignorant of the badge and her reputation. He informs her that he is from Seoul in Korea. This response now causes her to be confused by the unfamiliar names, leading her to suspect that a certain eccentric mage's dimensional travel spell might have actually worked. She communicates these suspicions to him. In simple terms, a magic user from her dimension had placed an enchantment on the dungeon, which resulted in it being transported into his dimension. Such a phenomenon did not seem plausible, yet it appeared to be precisely what had occurred. However, given that it was a dimensional displacement, reversing the magic would theoretically allow her to return to her own world. Jin-Yuk had sensed that things were not normal, but this confirmed the dungeon was not native to his reality. If this location reverted to its original plane, it would create a significant problem for him. He inquired if she intended to send the dungeon back immediately, but she was unable to. It would be excessively difficult to reverse the enchantment from their current position, although a specific, helpful location did exist. This place was a hidden room on the current floor, which she had located a long time prior while attempting to find an exit. She requested his help in reaching that room and guaranteed she would compensate him for his assistance. The terms seemed reasonable, so he consented to help her get to the concealed chamber. They set off, defeating a few orcs as they traveled. Jin-Yuk observed that she was considerably more powerful than he had initially believed. The arrow she had fired earlier was clearly very potent. He realized that starting a fight with her in this environment would put him at a severe disadvantage. His most prudent option was to maintain cooperation and continue assessing the situation. After walking for a while longer, they chose to rest in a secure area. Jin-Yuk had some chocolates in his pockets for emergencies, and he offered one to her. She immediately developed a taste for it and demanded more. After she had consumed his entire supply, she requested even more. He explained that was unfortunately the last piece, which she accepted, appearing satisfied enough to resume the journey. Eventually, they arrived at a large chamber that housed the dungeon's boss. Lucia speculated that the mage's spell might be located within that room. To investigate, they would first need to eliminate the boss and clear the area. She advised him that his involvement would be minimal. He only needed to help her deliver the final blow after she had incapacitated the creature. They opened the door, and the monster immediately released an enraged roar before charging. Lucia readied an arrow, aiming directly at the boss's chest. She instructed Jinyuk to watch her closely, then utilized a technique she called Aura to enhance the impact of her attack. She fired the arrow, striking the boss head-on and knocking the enormous armored creature onto its back instantly. Her single attack was sufficient to bring it down. This was the technique she planned to teach him, but first, he needed to finish the monster before it could get back up. As with the golems, he had to strike the core to defeat it. He jumped onto the chest of the fallen creature and repeatedly struck the area where he believed the core was located. One hit, however, did not seem sufficient to destroy it, and a large fist swung at him from the side. He narrowly intercepted the blow using one of his cleric abilities, the Holy Shield, and then used the resulting force to propel himself back onto the boss's chest. Recognizing that a single strike is insufficient, Jinyuk continues to hammer the spot relentlessly until the creature ceases all movement. He eventually succeeds in shattering the core, permanently defeating the beast. This victory causes him to level up again, bringing him close to level 200. With the monster vanquished, he approaches Lucia to request instruction on using Aura. She informs him, however, that he has already utilized it. His Holy Shield ability had converted his divine cleric energy into Aura. While he perceived it as a simple class skill, Lucia is unfamiliar with such a concept. Furthermore, his capacity to use such abilities suggests he can master Aura implementation much quicker than she had anticipated. Because he possesses a strong potential for wielding it, he might be capable of imbuing his attacks with Aura immediately. This, however, is contingent on one condition. She requires him to return and acquire more chocolates for her. Elsewhere in the city, Sang-ho is walking with his secretary, Lee Hyena, discussing a newly emerged anomaly near Gangnam Station. Its detection the previous day means they have approximately 5 days to prepare before a formidable monster manifests at that location. Regardless of how Sang-ho analyzes the situation, he concludes that his guild cannot handle the threat alone. Unfortunately, all other major guilds are currently deployed internationally, leaving the Titan Guild as the only available force in Korea to combat it. Hyena is tasked with continuing the search for competent local freelancers, but none of the candidates appear dependable. Sang-ho, in contrast, has a specific individual in mind. In a stroke of coincidence, that very person happens to be crossing the street opposite them. Sang-ho promptly excuses himself from the discussion with his secretary and hurries after Jin-hyuk. Jin-hyuk is transporting a large container of snacks, requested by the elf, when the guild master's voice intercepts him. Sang-ho extends his offer for Jin-hyuk to join the Titan Guild again, but Jin-hyuk has no intention of altering his previous decision. Faced with this refusal, Sang-ho proposes an alternative, a mercenary contract for Jin-hyuk. This arrangement would allow him to work for the guild without being an official member. The compensation offered is also significant. This proposition sounds more appealing, but Jin-hyuk only commits to considering it. He goes back to the dungeon and delivers the snacks to the elf. She consumes them all gleefully, and it becomes evident that such food items are not available in her world. Following her satisfying meal, Jin-hyuk inquires why she remains in the boss room when the monster has already been defeated. She indicates a magic circle on the ceiling, explaining that it serves as the connection point between the dungeon and his world. Due to this, she intends to stay in that location for the time being to analyze it. She implies that if he wishes to learn more about Aura, he must supply her with more chocolates. Having finished eating, she takes his hand to begin the lesson on Aura. As a first step, she must infuse her own aura into his body to demonstrate the sensation. Jin-hyuk instantly perceives the energy flowing into him. Lucia also observes a significant surge of power within Jin-hyuk's body after she transfers her aura. It appears he possesses a greater natural talent for it than she had initially anticipated. The circulation of holy power moving through Jin-hyuk's body is so impressive that Lucia is confident he will be able to understand the basics within the day. She praises his aptitude and asks if he can retain the memory of the aura's flow within him. He confirms that he can, and she acknowledges this before preparing to leave the chamber. She had initially planned to investigate the magic circle, but it now seems more efficient to fully instruct him on aura usage. She determines the best way to accomplish this is through direct, practical experience. Lucia leads him to a separate area of the dungeon and effectively pushes him into a large gathering of monsters. He immediately engages an army of goblins and kobolds simultaneously, managing to defend himself effectively while also collecting their carcasses. He turns to Lucia, demanding to know why he is suddenly fighting a horde of creatures when she said he would be learning to use aura. She explains that this combat is the method by which he will learn. While she infused a small amount of mana into his body to provide a baseline feeling, he is required to sense the rest on his own. To do this, he just needs to master the process of activating aura through his holy power. Lucia asserts that there is no better way to develop that instinct than in the midst of genuine combat. Jinyuk is more annoyed that she failed to mention any of this and instead thrust him into the conflict without warning. While they are fighting, the ground begins to tremble, and a stone golem emerges from beneath the floor. It releases a loud roar and shoves Jinhyuk away, as Lucia continues to explain that he must face a true crisis to unlock his potential. She instructs him to concentrate and attempt to feel the holy power originating from the shield he generates with his skill. The shield, she reveals, is constructed from aura, so once he gets accustomed to it, he should be able to grasp the concept quickly. This is easier said than done, as Jinyuk does not consciously activate the holy shield. He wonders how he is supposed to feel aura from a skill that engages automatically. The monster brings a huge fist down toward Jinhyuk, and he blocks it with the holy shield again. This time, however, he senses something. It is a type of energy gathering around his left hand, which is the hand that activates the skill. He concludes this must be what holy power feels like. The monster pulls back and attacks once more. Jinhyuk summons his holy shield again, only this time, it presents a different shape than he remembers. The sensation of summoning the shield is also different. He identifies this feeling as mana. The golem affords him no time to process this development and smashes down on the shield, sending Jinyuk flying backward. Lucia mocks him from her position, noting that she told him to get the hang of his skill, not to make foolish errors. He was, however, just doing what she had instructed. As he prepares for another attack, a status window appears before him, announcing that he has acquired a new skill called Holy Power Application. This new ability grants him the use of Holy Power, allowing him to augment his offensive and defensive maneuvers based on the quantity of energy utilized. This revelation indicates that it is possible to acquire skills through methods other than a formal class change. Lucia observes his momentary lack of focus and decides to intervene. It seems that battling a golem while simultaneously learning aura manipulation was too difficult for him, so she offers to manage the creature herself. Jinhyuk, however, quickly regains his composure and signals for her to stand back. Now that he has a better handle on his new abilities, he feels he should be able to deal with the situation. He charges the golem and leaps, narrowly evading another stone fist aimed directly at him. While in midair, he channels his mana into the bat, using a front flip to increase his momentum before bringing the mana-infused weapon down on the golem's head. The creature topples, but he is not yet finished. He lands on its chest and concentrates once more, trying to channel even more mana into his bat before striking it down hard onto the golem's torso, a move that simultaneously unlocks a new skill designated Holy Aura. With his empowered weapon, he thrusts the bat into the golem, successfully shattering its core. Unlocking his Holy Aura also facilitated the acquisition of new skills, such as Precision Strike and Unyielding. As a result of Lucia's training, he had gained 2 passive skills and 1 active skill. She, however, is more focused on the fact that he learned to apply aura in combat so rapidly. She had planned only to impart the basic principles and conclude the lesson, but this development forces her to see the training through. She takes one of her arrows and uses it to destroy a nearby wall, exposing the area to an even larger horde of monsters. Jinhyuk is not thrilled by this, but he readies his bat and prepares for another round of combat. The battle with the dungeon monsters takes a significant toll on him, and by the time he goes to sell the monster remains, he is completely drained. He is so fatigued that the black market boss, Jun-chul, comments on his condition when they meet. Jinhyuk looks as though he has just been through a war. Jun-chul chooses not to probe for details and moves directly to business, accepting the monster corpses. He also raises the topic of the alcohol Jinhyuk had sold him previously. Jun-chul had marketed the drink as a traditional artisan soju, and since its release, orders have been flooding in. The beverage had become so popular in such a short period that Jinhyuk could likely focus exclusively on selling liquor and never face financial concerns again. With enough money to last him indefinitely and a small side business already established, Jinhyuk returns home to rest. His training session with Lucia has left him immensely tired, and only seconds after lying down, he passes out. Not long after falling asleep, He is awakened by the sound of a disaster alert. A loud, automated voice urges everyone on the street to evacuate and seek safety. The day of the monster invasion is already underway. It seems to have arrived early this month. Monster invasions generally happen unpredictably, but one specific invasion occurs on a fixed one-month cycle. This type of invasion was a fairly regular event, and Jinyuk typically used these situations to hunt some low-level creatures for extra money. On this occasion, however, he was too exhausted to be concerned. He reasoned that the large guilds would manage the threat, so his involvement would not be necessary. That remained his intention until an alert arrived on his phone. It announced that due to the invasion's severity, the bounties for monsters would be increased threefold. With such lucrative rewards available, Jinyuk could no longer dismiss the event. He went out into the street to determine if he could defeat some monsters and profit from the situation. Concurrently, security personnel were directing civilians and attempting to secure the streets as the Titan Guild fought against swarms of monsters rampaging through the city. The defensive line was already failing under the pressure from the sheer number of creatures, and Sang-ho was beginning to lose the stamina needed to continue the fight. Regardless of how many monsters he defeated, more creatures persistently appeared. The guild's members were reaching their breaking point. Although they appeared to have the advantage, the overall situation was not favorable. The guild's secretary, Hyena, observed the battle with concern from a safe distance. While the situation seemed stable due to the guild master's efforts, she could perceive that their forces were being spread thin. She felt that just one additional strong hunter could change the battle's outcome. Her thoughts turned to a man whom the guild master had recently identified as promising. She retrieved her phone and placed a call to Jinyuk. He was currently engaged in combat with some goblins when he answered. She proposed an opportunity for him to fight alongside the Titan Guild, for which he would receive substantial payment. He countered by requesting 5 times the standard compensation rate. She then suggested they convene at a pre-arranged location for further discussion. Upon meeting, she offered him 4 times the compensation, an offer he hesitantly accepted. Following the agreement, she provided him with a device to log his monster kills, allowing the guild to track his contribution. If his performance in the battle was deemed above average, he would receive the full amount he had requested. Having secured an opportunity to display his capabilities and receive proper remuneration, Jinyuk departed for the battle to lend his assistance. Hyena observed his departure with some reservation, uncertain if he would meet the high expectations Sang-ho had for him. Jinyuk had previously defeated Endoyen, an event she attributed to sheer luck, and his true skill level remained unverified. Upon reaching the battlefield, he immediately targeted a rampaging ogre, an action that astonished the onlookers. He succeeded in killing the beast with a single, swift attack, leading the crowd to assume he must be an A-rank hunter at minimum. While A-rank was close, Jinyuk felt that his current abilities placed him above that classification. He paused briefly to consume a mana potion and restore his energy. As a result of Lucia's rigorous training, he had successfully attained level 200. Under normal circumstances, facing an ogre would be impossible, but he now believed that as long as his mana reserves held, he could potentially match the performance of an S-rank hunter. Jinyuk currently has a stockpile of over 1,500 mana potions, a resource that transforms all the surrounding monsters into simple opportunities for profit. Elsewhere, Endoyen is fighting monsters alongside his guild members. He observes that the number of creatures is decreasing dramatically and turns to see a crowd observing someone defeating monsters with ease. He moves to check the situation himself and spots the one person he detests the most. He yells orders at the stunned hunters, telling them to stop daydreaming and resume fighting. He wonders why Jinyuk is present and who invited him. The mere sight of Jinyuk reminds Endoyen of their previous encounter and the embarrassing moment that was broadcast across the news. He concludes that the last time must have been a fluke. He reasons that this time, since Jinyuk is alone, there will be no issue in taking him out and putting him in his place. With that decision made, he rushes toward Jinyuk, intending to fix the man's nasty habit of being in the worst place at the wrong time. Unluckily for Endoyen, the C-rank hunter notices him far too early and successfully counters the attack, sending Endoyen flying and knocking him unconscious yet again. Jinyuk is too occupied to entertain the random crazy guy. Meanwhile, Sang-ho faces down a rampaging minotaur. His mana is almost gone, and he is out of stamina. The minotaur raises its club to attack just as Sang-ho considers the idea of retreating to regain his strength. Before the weapon can hit him, a voice calls out from behind, and Jinyuk jumps in from above. Jinyuk grabs the minotaur by the horn and slams it forcefully into the ground. For a C-rank hunter to defeat a minotaur with a single hit, it seems Sangho's judgment about Jinyuk was perfectly accurate. As the monster is taken down, Sangho approaches Jinyuk to show his appreciation for the help. Jinyuk informs him that the guild master's secretary had called and promised a significant payment in return for his assistance, so there is no need for thanks. Sangho then uses this chance to once again ask Jinyuk to join their guild. He suggests that if Jinyuk joins forces with them, opportunities like this will continue to appear. Jinyuk takes a moment to consider the offer, then tells Sangho that he will think about it after they finish clearing out the remaining monsters. As they are talking, Sangho receives a call from Hyena. She tells him to look at the sky. The clouds have turned black, and the weather has become fiery, filled with lightning. Something huge and menacing is lurking within the clouds, and it does not appear friendly. The entity shoots lightning down at everything, striking monsters and hunters alike, and damages buildings as it flies around. It is positioned so high in the sky that there is no way their skills can reach it. This means that there might be no way to attack it. Sangho suggests returning to his guild headquarters to assess the situation and invites Jinyuk to join him. Jinyuk reluctantly agrees, and together they meet back at Sangho's office. From there, they run different tests and simulations, concluding that nothing they have done so far can affect the creature or defend against its attacks. Every strategy they had employed thus far to stop the entity had been either nullified or destroyed. They needed to find an alternative with an enormous amount of firepower, one that could also engage targets from a significant distance. Lucia immediately came to Jinyuk's mind, and he realized a viable method to defeat the creature might exist after all. As Jinyuk departed to retrieve Lucia, the executives of the Titan Guild convened, discussing the amount of favoritism Sangho was displaying toward a C-rank hunter. The other guild members attempted to brainstorm different ways to bring the monster down, without relying on Jinyuk, but there was simply no other choice available. All other known methods were guaranteed to be ineffective, leaving them with the sole option of trusting the only hunter who had a potential plan. They considered requesting aid from another guild named Gadia, a large organization populated by A-rank mages and higher. Unfortunately, that particular guild was known for its indifference to casualties, and summoning them would almost certainly result in many deaths. The other members present in the room fell silent as they accepted that they truly had no alternative but to wait. Back at the apartment, Jinyuk emerged from the portal accompanied by Lucia. He thanked her for agreeing to help and promised her a reward of as many sweet confections from his world as she could possibly want. Together, they ascended to the top of the Titan Guild headquarters. Jinyuk showed her the monster that was currently terrorizing their city. He asked if she possessed the ability to defeat it, and she confirmed with certainty that she could. The creature was so massive, she remarked, that she could hit it with her eyes closed. The monster was designated as level 300, which represented the highest level monster ever recorded. She assured him she could eliminate it, but first she required some assistance. The building's roof was too fragile to withstand the force of her power, and she needed him to prepare a shield to absorb most of the impact if he wished to prevent the destruction of multiple buildings. With the preparations understood, Jinyuk contacted the guild leader to inquire about the potential collateral damage. Once they engaged the monster, damage to the surrounding buildings would be unavoidable. Sangho instructed him not to worry about that and to focus exclusively on bringing down the monster. With that matter settled, Jinyuk prepared a shield while Lucia charged 2 arrows to attack the beast. She aimed meticulously, then released the shots. The discharge produced a massive shockwave that forced Jinyuk backward even with his shield deployed. The 2 projectiles raced through the sky toward the monster, and in a mere second, landed a direct hit on the beast, eliminating it in a single strike. The damage inflicted was so immense that half of the monster's body was disintegrated from the impact. The Titan Guild watched from the ground, astounded that he had managed to resolve the situation so easily. Hunter Kang Jinyuk just continued to astound people. The backlash from Lucia's attack was powerful enough to leave smoking trail marks burned into the building's helipad. While it may not have been an appropriate time for restraint, the power displayed was far beyond expectations. Lucia, on the other hand, was more disappointed that the monster had proven to be so weak. This was not an accurate assessment. It was more that Lucia possessed a level of strength far exceeding that of any monster appearing in this world. Regardless, the objective was achieved, and it was time for her to return. She passed Jinyuk the tracking device that logged his points, which showed a remarkable reading of 240. With that, she turned to depart, but first offered him a warning about placing too much trust in others. She noted that when the stakes are high, people's judgment often becomes clouded by the prospect of wealth. She advised him to avoid being deceived, as she had been during her own adventures. Jinyuk gave her his assurance that he would be fine and would handle any issues that might arise. They parted ways, and Jinyuk proceeded down to the street, where he was met by Sang-ho and his secretary. They caught up to him, asking how he had successfully taken down such an enormous monster by himself. He politely declined to answer, stating that his method was a secret. One of the executives accompanying them took offense at this, declaring his disbelief that a C-rank hunter could defeat such a beast. Jinyuk responded by displaying the monster tracker, which registered a massive number of points, confirming he was responsible for the monster's defeat. Sang-ho quickly interjected, apologizing to Jinyuk for the executive's sharp remarks. The executive watched them with fury, feeling that Sang-ho was showing preference to a C-rank hunter over his own guild members. He concluded that a change was necessary, as Sang-ho was impeding the guild's future. The executive took out his phone and made a call to an unknown number. By the next day, the rumor had propagated throughout the city that the giant monster had been eliminated by an ordinary C-rank hunter. While members of the Titan Guild were skeptical, the fact was not difficult to confirm. Word also circulated that the guild master had personally offered this hunter direct admission into the Titan Guild, an offer that was refused. It was surmised that the hunter must be extremely confident in his skills to decline such a significant offer from Sang-ho. The rumors eventually reached members of the Ultron Guild. They had also received reports that Do-yoon had been hospitalized after the monster invasion. Do-yoon was known for his formidable skills, but the information suggested he had been taken down by this same rumored C-rank hunter. If that were true, it would lend credibility to the other stories. The scouts from the Ultron Guild decided they needed to meet with Jinyuk in person to verify this information. The Ultron Guild representatives hypothesized that he might have activated a hidden class, a development that was extraordinarily rare among hunters. If that hypothesis was correct, they concluded they had to either secure him for their guild before any rivals did, or, failing that, eliminate him. Jinyuk, in contrast, slept deeply following the intense battle. He had completely exhausted his stamina during the fight and had fallen unconscious at the first available moment. He awoke after 2 full days of profound sleep, realizing this was the backlash from his severe overexertion. He walked into his living room and discovered Lucia had created a substantial mess with all the snacks he had acquired for her. She had managed to consume the entire stash within those 2 days. She explained she had no other option, as there was no food remaining in the refrigerator, and the snacks were the only edible items available. She also remarked that she had been unable to return to the dungeon because he had not activated the portal for her. This statement confused Jinyuk, as he had never needed to consciously open it in the past. As far as he knew, it was perpetually active. He proceeded to his attic to show her that the portal was indeed open even at that moment. This contradicted her experience, as she insisted nothing had been there just moments before. She instructed him to move away from the doorway. When he did, the portal vanished. It was confirmed that there was nothing there once he had stepped back. Jinyuk had no explanation for this, as his entire experience had been of the portal being constantly accessible. Lucia offered a theory that the dungeon was responding exclusively to him, meaning the dungeon followed him wherever he went. It seemed the dungeon was somehow imprinted directly onto him. This implied a frightening possibility that the dungeon could have materialized directly onto his location, but luckily it was the result of a failed spell. He opted not to dwell on that disturbing idea, and instead ordered food for both of them. Lucia then expressed curiosity about how he had even managed to find his way back to the apartment after the monster battle. She revealed that she had cast a recognition suppression spell on the building, which should have made it impossible for anyone to locate. Jinyuk questioned why she would place such a spell on his home. She clarified that while he was unconscious, several strange individuals had repeatedly come by. They were from guilds called Ultron and Guardian, and their persistence became so annoying that she cast the spell to ensure they could not come back at all. Jinyuk was confused about why such large guilds would be searching for him, so he took out his phone to learn what had occurred while he was asleep. The very first headline he read immediately grabbed his attention. News reporting that he had defeated the new giant monster had spread widely online. There was even a video circulating that clearly showed him fighting alongside the Titan Guild. It seemed he had become famous virtually overnight. He recognized this was going to be a problem. It appeared that Jinyuk had become too avaricious, and his exploitation of Lucia's power had consequently put him in the spotlight. The hunter industry is notably territorial. And whenever a formidable competitor is identified, efforts are made to eliminate them as swiftly as possible. He chose not to dwell on past decisions. With Lucia finished eating, they traveled back into the dungeon to deliver their spoils to the dwarf. As a result of Lucia's overwhelmingly powerful shot, the monster's body was too compromised to be usable, and they were only successful in recovering its head. The old man was visibly frustrated with the elf for overdoing it and destroying valuable material. It seemed that he and Lucia possessed a mutual, natural animosity toward one another. Jinyuk interjected during their argument, asking the dwarf if he could craft anything from the remains. The dwarf took a moment and retrieved something from deep within the head, the organ that had allowed the beast to generate lightning. With that component, he could enchant the baseball bat to produce lightning as well. Jinyuk asked the dwarf how he wished to be compensated, but all the dwarf wanted was for the elf to get out of his workshop. Lucia began to shake with anger, and Jinyuk was forced to placate her by promising more sweets. After just managing to stop her from firing a hole straight through the dwarf's head, he headed back into the city to acquire the promised treats. On his route back home, he sensed something in an alley. It became apparent that someone was tracking him. He dropped his groceries behind a wall and called out to the individual who was following him. A voice replied, sounding surprised that Jinyuk had noticed him. Suddenly, a figure appeared from thin air and rushed at Jinyuk, swinging a sword. Jinyuk only just managed to block the attack with his bat. The newcomer was astonished that Jinyuk could perceive him at all. This interaction confirmed that the rumors were true. Jinyuk really was more than a conventional C-rank hunter. Jinyuk shoved the attacker back, then leaped at him with another strike from his bat. Since the assailant clearly did not want to reveal his identity, Jinyuk decided he would just have to beat him until he felt like talking. Realizing he could not win a head-on fight, the attacker used a skill to become invisible again, deciding to alter his tactics. Jinyuk could just faintly sense the attacker's presence, but was unable to see him. This slight sense, however, was just enough to anticipate when he was about to strike. Jinyuk succeeded in dodging and blocking most of the attacks that were launched at him, but he knew that at this rate, things would not go well for him much longer. If he had his usual enhanced bat, he could track the enemy more easily, but the old dwarf was currently modifying it, which meant Jinyuk had to revert to using a regular aluminum bat. He could not remain in this situation. With no other means of effectively fighting, Jinyuk made a run for it, but not before the hooded attacker successfully attached a tracking device to his shirt. Jinyuk made his way toward a crowded area to hide, but the attacker's device allowed him to continue monitoring Jinyuk's movements. The tracking signal guided the assassin to a restroom inside a department store, which he entered after activating his camouflage. He stopped before the stall indicated by the device and kicked the door open, braced for combat. He found nothing inside, however, except for the tracking device affixed to the partition. It was a trap. The assassin realized this far too late, as Jinyuk emerged from behind, swinging his bat. Within the enclosed area, invisibility would not provide a sufficient escape. The assassin just managed to evade the strike and countered with a knife thrust aimed at Jinyuk's face. This was easily dodged, and Jinyuk seized his assailant's arm before slamming him onto the floor. With no escape route available and the wind knocked out of him, the assassin was subdued. Jinyuk raised his bat, preparing to strike the man's head unless he revealed who had dispatched him. Concurrently, a young boy outside urgently needed to use the facilities. Although a sign restricted entry, the child could not wait. His father reluctantly let him go just as the assassin seemed about to provide an answer. This interruption was the exact opportunity the assassin required. He conjured a fireball and directed it at both Jinyuk and the child, compelling Jinyuk to deploy a shield to protect them. The assassin used the ensuing smoke as cover to attempt an escape. His superiors had only tasked him with gathering information. He had not anticipated such a difficult confrontation. As he tried to flee, an object pierced his chest, killing him instantly. Jinyuk stood behind him, catching his breath. It seemed he had applied too much force and unintentionally killed the man. As Jinyuk was processing this outcome, a system window appeared. It acknowledged the kill, but officially classified the act as self-defense. Due to this designation, the villain trait would not be applied. Instead, a hidden job change had become available. Following the hostile scuffle in the restroom with the mysterious criminal, Kang Jin-hyuk waited outside the crime scene, still reeling from the event. According to his knowledge, when a hunter takes a human life, they are supposed to be branded with the infamous villain title. Furthermore, clerics like him typically suffered a penalty where their skills were sealed. He genuinely believed his career was over, as his combat strength would be significantly diminished without his cleric abilities. However, killing the assailant had, surprisingly, triggered a class change. Two detectives approached the shaken young man to get his statement about the incident. The lead detective, Jo Kyung-yeon from the Hunter Affairs Division, displayed his badge and politely requested Jin Hyuk's cooperation on the sensitive matter. They had identified the magic casting hunter who attacked him. Jin Hyuk provided the detectives with a truthful account. He explained that when the magician found himself cornered, he used magic with lethal intent. He had unleashed fire magic, fully aware that a child would be caught in the blast. Jin Hyuk was worried that the child might have been harmed, but the detectives assured him that the boy had only received minor burns and nothing serious. The child and his father both expressed their profound gratitude to Jin Hyuk for his timely intervention. Jin Hyuk was primarily relieved that the child had avoided any serious harm. The investigators confirmed that the child was safe due to Jin Hyuk's swift and appropriate reaction. Because of his commendable actions in neutralizing a criminal, they anticipated no complications in having the case officially classified as self-defense. He was informed he could return home as soon as the investigation concluded. Jin Hyuk had honestly anticipated more difficulties, but fortunately, the officials were being sensible. Detective Joe suggested that the young man's previous reputation likely influenced the situation, noting that the laws governing hunters often differed from standard regulations. However, there was an additional factor contributing to their lenient approach toward him. This factor was his failure to receive the villain title, despite having taken a life. That specific title is only designated when an individual intentionally commits murder. It does not manifest when the killing is deemed an act of self-defense. This distinction was a widely known, unspoken secret among hunters. If Jin Hyuk agreed to remain silent about what he had learned, he could avoid the inconvenience of a formal legal trial. Conversely, if he chose to disclose any information about the incident, it would create significant complications for the entire Hunter Affairs Division. Jin Hyuk understood the implication and knew to stay quiet. Nonetheless, from the division's standpoint, trust was limited and involved certain risks. To be cautious, Detective Joe provided Jin Hyuk with a recording device as a safety precaution. He was instructed that, moving forward, he must carry the device with him constantly. To be direct, the monitoring tool was designed to activate if it detected 3 specific forbidden words. Upon registering the words murder, villain, or self-defense, the device would immediately transmit a signal to the authorities. As long as Jin Hyuk refrained from discussing the incident and avoided using those specific terms, no issues were expected. Detective Joe encouraged Jin Hyuk to return home and recover from the shock, assuring him that the professionals would handle the cleanup. Jin Hyuk expressed his thanks to the detectives and departed for home, his expression somber. Immediately after his departure, the detectives began discussing him, noting the rumors that he was the one who had defeated the new monster type. They agreed that even an untrained observer could easily see Jin Hyuk was not a mere C-rank hunter. He had successfully blocked a maximum strength fire attack, taking no damage himself while simultaneously shielding a child. The high-level magic-using criminal he faced was not an adversary that just anyone could overcome. At this stage, Jin Hyuk's mysterious abilities were clearly more substantial than mere exaggerated rumors. The division was certain that Kang Jin Hyuk possessed power, far exceeding that of a standard C rank. The detectives hoped he would avoid any further trouble, which would allow them to cultivate mutual trust. At last, finding himself alone, Jin Hyuk examined his new class, the Inquisitor. This was a hidden classification for which no public records existed. He had wished to obtain such a class one day, but had not anticipated it would happen this quickly. Instead of simply reviewing the skill descriptions, he preferred to evaluate his new class through practical combat. He permitted a goblin to get near enough to attempt an attack. He was testing the ability that had replaced his healing skills, now called Hard Skin. This specialized skin significantly reduced the damage received from enemy strikes. He had also acquired a new status resistance skill, which made him less vulnerable to poison, sleep, stun, and various other adverse effects. Satisfied with these new acquisitions, Jin Hyuk lifted his fist toward the goblin before him. He now comprehended why the term transformation was used. Although his previous skill effects were still present, their nature had shifted from supportive to self-focused. He was no longer able to use Holy Aura. However, he had obtained the Fighting Spirit skill, which adapted his aura for combat. Confronting goblins with only his bare hands had become much simpler. His Holy Shield skill had been superseded by the Defense Charge skill, enabling him to rush forward with unstoppable force and a near impenetrable defense. Eliminating swarms of goblins using only his body was now remarkably easy. He had essentially received a protective ability, a charging maneuver, and resistance to all status effects. His transition into an Inquisitor had effectively turned him into a complete combat tank. Once he concluded the testing of his new combat abilities, he directed his focus to his other new skills. He had acquired a discernment ability that measured karma, assigning a numeric value to an individual's morality. Jin-hyuk took out his smartphone and activated the front-facing camera, observing the number 64 hovering above his head. The practical value of this skill remained uncertain. He lacked any point of reference to determine what qualified as high karma, leaving him unsure if his score of 64 was positive or negative. Furthermore, he received another skill tied to karma, the Judgment skill. This new ability would enhance his stats and provide additional effects when he confronted an enemy with a high karma value. Specifically, his stats would increase by 20% against foes with 200 or more karma, 50% against those with 300 karma, and 100% against those with 500 or more karma. In essence, he would become more powerful when combating malevolent individuals. This feature by itself was enough to make the Inquisitor class worthy of its hidden status. Even so, a class that so overtly encouraged its wielder to hunt down villains was unprecedented. Following his experimentation, Jin-hyuk proceeded directly to the forge. Upon his arrival, the old dwarf was just completing the process of imbuing his bat with lightning power. The weapon could now store a maximum of 3 lightning charges, with each charge requiring 30 minutes to replenish. Jin-hyuk was, naturally, very satisfied with this upgrade. He inquired how to utilize the impressive new feature, and the method proved to be quite simple. The old dwarf had apprehended a kobold that was attempting to steal from his workshop and had secured the creature in the backyard. It would serve as the ideal test subject. The creature snarled and struggled aggressively, but it was unable to break free from its restraints. To deploy the lightning, Jin-hyuk did not require any incantations or gestures. He could simply utilize it during combat by visualizing the attack in his mind. The young man concentrated, keeping his gaze fixed on the target. He adopted a posture resembling a baseball batter preparing to hit a fastball, all while imagining the electrical power flowing through the bat. Jin-hyuk took a deep breath and focused his intent. With one complete swing, he unleashed a ball of lightning. It crackled as it tore through the air without resistance. The instant it struck the kobold, the creature yelped in agony as an immense voltage of electricity ravaged its body. A single charge was sufficient to incinerate the monster. The chains fell loose as the kobold's physical form disintegrated into dust. Even its skeleton was charred black, demonstrating the formidable power of the thunder charge. The old dwarf was visibly pleased with his outstanding craftsmanship. Gaining access to a ranged attack would significantly simplify Jin-hyuk's future fights. Now that the test was complete, Lucia approached Jin-hyuk and requested a private conversation. The elf led him to a corner and grabbed the unfamiliar pendant hanging around his neck. She confronted him regarding his recent activities in the outside world. Lucia had perceived that Jin-hyuk's body no longer held any divine power, and she was also suspicious of the item he was wearing. She was simply concerned that Jin-hyuk was involved in something strange. The young man defended himself, assuring her it was all a misunderstanding. He provided Lucia and the old dwarf with an overview of what had transpired externally. He explained his involvement in an incident that had completely transformed his divine power into something else. Furthermore, he was unable to provide specific details because of the peculiar trinket given to him by the detectives. In the old dwarf's assessment, the solution was simple. He could first neutralize the device, which would allow them to hear the complete story. The blacksmith was willing to tamper with the trinket, but Jin-hyuk would be required to complete an errand for him first. The old dwarf insisted that the task was minor, just a simple favor in exchange for his services. After rummaging through his bag, he tossed a compass into Jin-hyuk's hand. Merely by observing the compass, Lucia seemed to understand exactly where the old dwarf was sending Jin-hyuk, and she appeared worried. Clueless about what he was getting into, the young man wondered if he was being dispatched to a dangerous location. This small errand led Kang Jin-hyuk to a treacherous, mountainous path that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Using basic hiking gear, he rappelled down an apparently bottomless chasm. He lamented that the old dwarf had sent him to such a hazardous place just to mine ores. While the young man struggled with the descent, Lucia was completely at ease. She even teased him for his difficulty. She asserted that he must follow her lead precisely and never stray on his own if he wanted to avoid trouble. Lucia then showed off her acrobatic skills and leaped gracefully from the cliff. Forsaking the security of a rope, Lucia utilized her hands to descend the cliff face. Jin-hyuk could only sigh, recognizing he could not possibly replicate what she did so effortlessly. Lucia criticized him for his excessive fear. In her view, he was needlessly restricting himself based on unfounded apprehension. Not wasting any more time, the elf plunged into the seemingly bottomless chasm, untroubled as gravity handled the descent. Jin-hyuk reflected that she might have a point. Perhaps he was being overly cautious and ought to place more faith in his enhanced physical capabilities. Consequently, the young man let go of his nervous hold on the rope and followed Lucia in a free fall. He figured he should at least attempt to test his body's new limits this one time. Upon nearing the end of the drop, he used his hands and legs to arrest his momentum, landing without any injury next to Lucia. Jin-hyuk at last understood that he was no longer a normal human. The elf had already been aware that he possessed a superhuman constitution. He was merely being held back by old fears. Pausing in the middle of their task, they rested on a steep ledge and discussed what had actually occurred. Lucia expressed concern that tampering with the monitoring device might cause trouble for Jin-hyuk. However, the old dwarf had assured them it would be fine, which implied there must be a viable method. That blacksmith could be grumpy, but he was undeniably talented and dependable. Even Lucia, who thoroughly disliked the old dwarf, conceded that he was reliable in matters like this. She was quite curious about the karma values associated with Jin-hyuk's new class. She inquired about her own karma level, and Jin-hyuk informed her it was 82, the highest of the three. Jin-hyuk's score was 64, while the old dwarf's was 72. Considering the difficult life Lucia had experienced, her having the highest karma did not shock her. She had been forced to do whatever was necessary for survival. Still, the disparity between her and Jin-hyuk was only 20 points, and he had only taken one life so far. Lucia, by contrast, had lost count of her own tally long ago. It occurred to her that in the world she came from, there were individuals known as saints who could perceive good and evil with a single look. Jin-hyuk asserted that he was nowhere near being a saint, and she concurred. She was just pointing out that the capacity to measure evil also existed in other dimensions. In any case, Lucia was not particularly invested in locating a mine for the dwarf. She was far more interested in thoroughly examining the young man's new skills. When pressed about her significant interest in Jin-hyuk's abilities, she playfully replied that she simply found him amusing. Since remaining in an empty dungeon would not provide them with a functional understanding of karma values, Lucia suggested they return to the outside world to conduct some experiments. Jin-hyuk felt guilty about pausing the errand for the old dwarf, but his primary desire was to better comprehend his new abilities. As Lucia had pointed out, staying in a dungeon with just the two of them would not further his understanding. Acknowledging this, he retrieved something from his pockets. Although he felt a degree of remorse toward the old man, Jin-hyuk produced a return stone designed to transport him instantly to a preset location in the outside world. After he crushed the stone in his hand, a dimensional rift materialized where they stood. Lucia was momentarily startled before the portal pulled her in. Curiously, taking this action raised Jin-hyuk's karma. A short time later, the duo found themselves standing on a crowded city street. Lucia acquired a drink, while Jin-hyuk fretted that her magical disguise was failing to prevent them from drawing attention. She had previously informed him that she used magic to obscure her true appearance and assimilate into the populace. However, the illusion, which depicted her in human clothing, seemed to make them even more noticeable. Nearly every person in the vicinity could not stop looking at the beautiful woman accompanying Jin-hyuk. Lucia cheekily maintained that her beauty was simply impossible to hide, which made the camouflage largely useless. As much as Jin-hyuk wished to refute this, he was unable. He conceded that Lucia might be the most attractive woman he had ever met. Moving past the light conversation, Lucia wanted to consolidate their knowledge regarding karma values. In simple terms, performing malevolent acts causes karma to accumulate. For instance, Jin-hyuk's karma score had risen by 1 point because he failed to honor his promise to the old dwarf. Beyond causing direct harm, karma can be accrued through other negative deeds. Conversely, in situations of consensual harm or self-defense, karma levels do not increase. They still lacked a clear baseline for what defined high or low karma, but they knew that exceeding 200 points classified an individual as a villain. Eliminating someone past the 200 karma threshold would not result in a penalty, It would be categorized as self-defense rather than murder, as the system no longer recognized such beings as human. Considering that neither Lucia nor the dwarf had even reached 100 points, one would have to be exceptionally evil to surpass 200. Jinyuk had been observing passersby all day and had yet to see any average person with a score exceeding 50. They were likely squandering their efforts in a relatively tranquil public area. To find people with genuinely high karma, they needed to relocate to a seedier part of the city. Fortunately, a known gathering place for malevolent individuals was easily found within the city's red light district. Lucia found herself fascinated by the intense, colorful lights illuminating the streets at night. She questioned if the inhabitants were not concerned about being detected by monsters. Jinyuk patiently clarified that, unlike the situation in her world, monsters do not typically wander freely on Earth. As an elf, she found the atmosphere in the red light district to be repulsive, but she conceded that the lights were aesthetically pleasing. Every world, she supposed, had its positive aspects. As they walked along the seedy streets, a disreputable barman intercepted the pair and commented on Lucia's attractiveness. The man claimed their bar was running a special event, allowing beautiful women to receive up to 5 cocktails at no charge. Lucia merely shoved the man out of her path and continued on her way. Before Lucia could proceed much further, Jin Hyuk caught her by the shoulder, urging her to wait. He insisted that they should remain for a while to partake in the complimentary beverages. The barman's expression brightened, and he escorted them into the establishment, vowing to give Lucia the finest service available. Following an entire day of walking and observing only average individuals with unremarkable karmic scores, Jin Hyuk had located what he was seeking. He identified the barman as a villain, noting a karma value of 300 visible above the man's head. The pair took seats at the bar and began consuming the liquor placed before them. The beverage possessed a sweet taste, which Lucia found very agreeable. Concurrently, the barman was quietly snickering, having just served the two a drink spiked with a poison potent enough to paralyze a target with a single drop. Believing the fast-acting toxin had successfully incapacitated them, the barman signaled to a group of thugs positioned nearby. The thugs intended to incapacitate Jin Hyuk first. As they drew near, the young man verbally challenged their decision. Because his status effect resistance skill had engaged, the poison in his drink had no effect. Jinyuk quickly pivoted and delivered a staggering strike to the jaw of one of the assailants. The young man smirked, relishing the opportunity to finally utilize his strength against these minor foes. He drew back his arm and launched another punch that connected with 2 goons simultaneously, a 2-for-1 strike. Judging by the distance the men were thrown, it was evident that the force behind his punches was exceptionally powerful. Without allowing the assailants time to recover, he executed a sharp pivot and used his other leg to strike another man in the face. A single kick was sufficient to render the man unconscious. Concurrently, Lucia slowly regained her senses as the paralytic agent's effects gradually faded from her system. She turned her head and observed a number of thugs incapacitated on the floor, all defeated by Jinyuk. Lucia was bewildered and asked what was occurring. The young man was, in effect, simply dealing with the troublemakers. The barman, having observed the entire confrontation, finally signaled for his main enforcer to intervene. A man referred to as Buzzcut removed his jacket, his muscles bulging beneath his shirt. He understood that he needed to regard the young man as a serious threat. Buzzcut then charged forward with impressive speed and power, yet the duo merely observed him with apathy. Jin Hyuk fixed his gaze on the man's hulking form as it sped toward him. Lucia consumed another sip of the spiked cocktail and inquired if Jinyuk required assistance. He declined her offer, confident in his ability to handle another opponent by himself. Buzzcut became infuriated that the pair was conversing as if he were completely irrelevant. He threw his most powerful punch, only to be stopped by a perfectly timed grab from Jinyuk. Regardless of how forcefully he pushed or tried to maneuver, Buzzcut could not make Jinyuk, who held his fist, move at all. This realization meant that the strange young man had to be a hunter. Buzzcut himself possessed the appearance and fighting style of a veteran hunter. He mused that if Jinyuk was a hunter, he should be fighting monsters, not engaging with criminals in a disreputable bar. Buzzcut had clearly not anticipated encountering someone with Jinyuk's capabilities during their illicit operation. Recognizing he was completely outmatched by the young man, Buzzcut was already calculating an escape from the perilous predicament. At that moment, Jinyuk adjusted his hold slightly and mercilessly shattered the man's fist. Buzzcut cried out in pain as he registered the sensation of multiple bones cracking simultaneously. Jinyuk was not finished. To silence Buzzcut, he delivered a punch directly to the man's mouth. Buzzcut was propelled backward, his body flying uncontrollably until his momentum was stopped by the row of bar chairs behind him. With all the enforcers dealt with, the only criminal left standing was the terrified barman. Jin-yuk moved aggressively, securing the villain in a chokehold and applying intense pressure that nearly crushed his windpipe. He hoisted the barman off the ground, restricting his oxygen supply while beginning the questioning. Naturally, Jin-yuk believed the interrogation would be ineffective without a preceding physical assault. He proceeded to splatter the bar walls with the villain's blood. By the time he felt he had delivered enough punches, Jin-yuk's fists were stained red. He had inflicted severe damage on the villain's face, rendering it almost unrecognizable. Jin-yuk commenced his questioning. It was clear this was not the first occasion the barman had orchestrated such a scheme. To manage this kind of operation, he required support from a benefactor. The barman fiercely denied having any backing. However, Jin-yuk reasoned that a low-level criminal could not possibly succeed at repeatedly drugging drinks and kidnapping women without being apprehended. The hired thugs must also be connected to a larger power structure. Hiring them would be impossible without organizational resources. Jin-yuk stared into the villain's eyes, offering a final opportunity to speak. Despite the beating and the threats, the barman persisted in his denial of any external involvement. This level of refusal to inform suggested either extreme loyalty or that the person behind the operation was more frightening than the current assault. To determine which was the case, Jin-yuk resolved to escalate his methods. Jin-yuk seized one of the barman's feet and began to pull. The villain, now both frightened and bewildered, started to squirm and scream. Jin-yuk maintained that he was merely assisting the man in finding the necessary motivation to confess. The barman attempted to maintain a tough facade, insisting that violence would not make him cooperate, but the young man disagreed. Before Jin-yuk could proceed with a more gruesome act, Lucia intervened, telling him to step aside and cease his barbaric, convoluted tactics. She conjured a mysterious energy in her hand and slowly moved it toward the barman's face. The villain's expression transitioned from fear and confusion to one of relaxation and slackness, though his appearance remained unsightly. As soon as Lucia's strange power permeated the barman's system, a few moments of quiet elapsed. Suddenly, the man's face contorted into a look of demonic madness, and he began to ask the pair if they were representatives of an organization called Altron. He then frantically insisted that regardless of what Altron tried to do, it was already too late. Whatever Lucia had done to the man reduced him to a mumbling state. Her action had simply made it easier for the barman to confess. She had not, however, anticipated that he would become completely insane and start revealing information uncontrollably. The barman continued, stating that Altron was insignificant because his tyrant guild would massacre every one of their foes. Just like that, the pair identified the power supporting this illicit operation, the Tyrant Guild. It became apparent that this situation was far bigger than Jin-hyuk had initially thought. He questioned the deranged barman about the source of his confidence regarding the Tyrant Guild's ability to massacre their enemies. The man simply replied that they possessed Alon's elixir. This answer only served to confuse the young man further, as he had no idea what the barman was referring to. A few minutes later, police authorities arrived to investigate the incident, prompting Jin-hyuk and Lucia to make a swift exit. The two of them had unexpectedly stumbled upon a massive conspiracy, one that extended to the highest levels, with a major guild secretly directing it. Lucia explained that Alon's elixir is a substance that doubles a user's stats. Its creation, she noted, necessitates the sacrifice of countless young women. She had never imagined that a guild on Earth would be capable of producing something so sinister. She found it unbelievable that a group of people was actually attempting to manufacture the drug. A substance equivalent to Alon's elixir also existed in her home world, where it was known as the Queen's Tear. One of Lucia's close friends had been sacrificed as fertilizer for this elixir during their youth. Many years later, immediately after Lucia attained platinum rank, she went on a campaign to personally eradicate the organization responsible for the drug's production. This history clarified why she had maintained such a grim expression since they departed the bar. The immediate question became what their next course of action would be. Given that the barman had revealed the elixir's near completion, their only option was to eliminate the Tyrant Guild before the process was finished. Back at the same bar, just after the police had departed the scene, a man dressed entirely in black was reporting the events to his superiors. This individual wore a mask and glasses that obscured half his face. According to his own investigation, The incident at the bar was not the result of an internal conflict. The strange part was that the perpetrators had killed only the barman before leaving. This peculiar method did not align with the tactics of a rival guild or any friendly faction. The masked man's new assignment was to identify those who had disrupted their operation as quickly as possible. He expressed confidence that he could apprehend the perpetrators swiftly. Shifting the focus to the Titan Guild, their senior leadership was currently on an overseas business trip. According to the capable secretary, Lee Hyena, the results of their trip to Hong Kong were excellent. If their performance in the first half of the year continued on this positive trend, they might consider the possibility of recruiting 15% more guild members. The guild was flourishing, yet the Titan Guild's leader, Seo Sang-ho, was not feeling well. He was experiencing stress regarding the news about Alain's elixir. Just as he had anticipated, Lee Hyena had no prior knowledge of such a thing. The association had been making significant efforts to hide its existence from the public. It was difficult for Lee Hyena to return to Korea at that moment, as she still had guild-related business overseas requiring her attention. Because that was the situation, Sang-ho would need to proceed on his own for the time being. He instructed Secretary Lee Hyena to immediately circulate an urgent directive to the entire guild. Effective immediately, the Titan Guild was to declare a completely hostile relationship with the Tyrant Guild. A war was facing everyone. Surprised by such an extreme move, Lee Hyena requested more details before they plunged the whole guild into a major conflict. Sang-ho's only reply was that a failure to prepare at this stage would only result in greater chaos down the line. He stated that if the information he had acquired proved to be accurate, it would be too late to act once the pandemonium began. Lee Hyena demanded to know what kind of information the leader had received that would cause him to act in such an uncharacteristic way. Sang-ho was fully aware that this order was equivalent to a declaration of war against an organization as large as their own. He also assured his secretary that the Ultron Guild and even the government would be on their side when the appropriate time came. Even with that assurance, war presented enormous risks for everyone involved. Lee Hyena proposed that they at least consult their guild executives to formulate a more cautious and rational decision. Sang-ho, however, had already made his choice. His thoughts had never been so clear, and he had no time for pointless meetings. Just by observing his eyes, Lee Hyena knew that the leader's mind was firmly set on this matter. Sang-ho was typically the cautious type, yet he was now making this incredibly decisive move. He acknowledged that she was feeling apprehensive about acting blindly without much information available. For the present, Sang-ho needed Lee Hyena to trust his judgment and to issue the order confidentially within the guild while they initiated quiet investigations. The formal announcement of war could be made later. As for the internal probes, Sang-ho had already identified a few people he required more information on. The catalyst for this sudden shift in Sang-ho was, clearly, a single text message from Jin Hyuk concerning the Tyrant Guild's plan to create the sinister drug via human sacrifice. Meanwhile, Lucia was relaxing at Jin Hyuk's residence, eating her sweets and pestering the young man about his plans. She was relieved to know that there were some trustworthy and level-headed individuals in this world, such as Seo Sang-ho. She remarked that if no one had agreed to join forces to destroy the Tyrant Guild, she would have taken care of the matter herself. It strengthened their case that the method for producing Alain's elixir was unquestionably inhumane. Jin Hyuk asked when the elf planned to return to the dungeon, instead of depleting his food supplies all day. She refused to go back to the tedious dungeon, and missed the opportunity to participate in a raid against a villainous guild. She speculated that the Tyrant Guild must consist of more than ordinary hunters, if they were deranged enough to concoct something so vile. Even Jin Hyuk had to concede that he could not take on such a large organization by himself, at least not at his current level. Lucia officially extended her help to wipe out those scoundrels together. Jin Hyuk thanked her for offering, even though she was under no obligation to do so. Suddenly, someone began knocking on the door and calling for Kang Jin Hyuk. He was not anticipating a visitor, so this came as an unexpected surprise. It was possible the visitor was just a delivery person, or perhaps it was something more. It might have been the masked operative who had been sent to look into the incident at the bar. This man possessed a magical compass that could track individuals using blood. He was utilizing the barman's blood to follow the traces remaining on Jin Hyuk's body. Leaving the bar, the operative navigated the extensive cityscape flawlessly without needing a car. The masked man began his hunt, moving across the rooftops of the buildings along his path. After pinpointing the direction of the blood signal, he finally landed in front of an apartment building. He gazed at the modest home and couldn't help but feel that something was strange. For a brief second, he thought the building looked hazy or indistinct, but he quickly dismissed this as his imagination. He also recognized the location as the residence of the hunter who had handled the Leviathan days earlier, which suggested the two incidents might be connected. This, however, was of no consequence to the masked man. He had been assigned a job, and he intended to complete it. Suddenly, he materialized a thick needle from thin air, which emanated a sinister aura. His plan was to capture his target and ask some questions. Jin-yuk walked to his door and called out, asking who was on the other side. As expected, the masked man replied that he had a late delivery that had been delayed by an accident. The young man was not foolish. It was highly improbable for a delivery to show up at such a late hour. Furthermore, the recognition suppression spell still active on the house made it virtually impossible to find. He reasoned that any person who could overcome such a powerful spell only to pretend to be a delivery person must have malicious intentions. Nevertheless, Jin-yuk opened his door, remaining highly vigilant. The masked man immediately tried to force his way inside, the sinister needle in his hand. Jin-yuk had anticipated such a tactic, so it was not difficult for him to intercept the assailant's hand as it lunged at him. He cheekily inquired if deliveries now included poison darts as a complimentary item. The masked man, who was supposed to be conducting the ambush, was the one caught completely off guard. Lucia then chimed in, hurriedly telling Jin-yuk to move aside as she fired an arrow from her bow. The arrow's speed and velocity were immense. It was practically impossible to dodge at such a close distance as it pierced the villain's body. The force of the shot sent the masked man flying backward out of the second-story apartment. He landed hard, bleeding profusely as the arrow remained lodged deep in his flesh and organs. Lucia knocked another arrow and told Jin-yuk to step away, as she intended to finish the man off. Jin-yuk waved her off, insisting on handling the problem himself, as he was sure the man was looking for him due to the events at the bar. Lucia warned him that the assailant was by no means ordinary, evidenced by the fact that he had survived one of her arrows. As the masked man attempted to dislodge the projectile, he shivered, wondering who the woman was that had managed to put him in such a critical state with a single attack. He finally succeeded in pulling the arrow out, bleeding all over the pavement. The masked man's every instinct was screaming for him to withdraw for the time being. By the time Jin-yuk attempted to follow, the assailant was already moving across the adjacent rooftops in an injured-looking manner. Lucia inquired if the young man intended to give chase, but Jin-yuk decided it was too troublesome. He reasoned the man would inevitably come after him again, allowing them to settle matters at a later date. What was more significant was the masked man's karma value. A score of over 900 hovered above his head. This indicated he was someone who killed without compunction. Jin-yuk was eager for a confrontation with a genuine villain, so this development was ideal. He was even considering how he might be able to use the masked man for his own purposes. The next day arrived, and a guild car escorted Jin-yuk and Lucia into the mountains. The driver stopped the vehicle and gestured toward the remote investigation site. They had been summoned there under guild leader Sang-ho's personal directive, but it was an open secret that many people in the Titan Guild were still not fond of Jin-yuk. Observing the troops assembled at the base, the young man surmised that half of them were A-rank hunters, or perhaps higher. It was a thoroughly elite group. The individual in charge was the same man who had tried to instigate a fight with Jin-yuk previously. It appeared Executive Han Young-sik would be leading this operation. Right from the start, Jin-yuk had a bad feeling that this mission was going to become annoying very quickly. The executive formally introduced himself as the head of the operation. Much to Jin-yuk's surprise, the man brought up the fact that they had encountered each other during the recent aerial attack. Jin-yuk commented on the executive's shift in personality, as he seemed much more amicable and kinder today than he had been before. Young-sik cleared his throat and awkwardly apologized for his behavior from that time. He claimed he had just become a little overzealous in his dedication to the guild, and wanted to take this opportunity to express his regret about their first meeting, hoping it would not adversely affect the current operation. Young-sik also asked about the woman Jin-yuk had brought along. The young man introduced Lucia as a skilled colleague who would not be a liability to the mission. The executive was slightly perturbed, as there had been no mention of any additional personnel. Before he could protest, however, the recon team they had sent out earlier returned. Young-sik excused himself for a moment to receive his scout's report. While the executive might have apologized, it was clear he was still looking down on Jin-yuk and Lucia, assuming they were merely C-rank novices. In any case, their true strength did not matter. as this executive had his own separate agenda for the mission. Lucia immediately sensed the executive's duplicitous nature and asked Jin-yuk if they were truly going to let the man lead. Jin-yuk assured her that they would be fine. More importantly, he noted, someone had been tailing them since earlier. Both Lucia and Jin-yuk had detected their poorly hidden pursuer long ago. The young man chose to let the pursuer be for now, as they could potentially make use of him later. Prior to the operation commencing, Jin-yuk provided Lucia with a luminous magical crystal. This small gem functioned as a communication device, enabling contact with anyone inside a 10-kilometer radius. They would require it later, making it essential to keep it accessible. Young-sik returned, having confirmed the initial intelligence. The information they had collected clearly indicated the Tyrant Guild's participation in human trafficking. Regarding the assault strategy, the executive had a specific request for Jin-yuk. The reconnaissance team had discovered a powerful barrier erected around the facility. They also concluded that only one individual possessed the capability to bypass the barrier undetected. Young-sik asserted that Jin-yuk was the only one suitable for infiltrating the barrier. Jin-yuk openly accused the executive of asking him to undertake what was essentially a suicide mission deep within enemy territory. The executive, however, maintained his facade as a neutral team leader. He sarcastically suggested that only the person who defeated the Leviathan could successfully execute such a stealth operation. He added that it would be more efficient for Jin-yuk to work alone rather than with Titan Guild members he was unfamiliar with. Young-sik was transparently placing the entire burden on Jin-yuk, offloading all the associated risks onto a single individual. While the executive might have believed he was manipulating Jin-yuk, this was exactly the scenario Jin-yuk had desired. Consequently, Jin-yuk accompanied a small group of Titan Guild hunters to the location where they could breach the barrier. The strategy was straightforward. The magic users would generate a small opening in the barrier, and Jin-yuk would have to quickly slip through. They arrived at the eastern face of the facility and hurried. The magic team was only capable of maintaining the small opening for a matter of seconds, necessitating that Jin-yuk move rapidly and run at full speed. Without delay, they began their work on the barrier to create the tiny access point for him. Jin-yuk was not bothered by the fact that he was being manipulated and intentionally sent alone toward the enemy. He was primarily intrigued about what the Tyrant Guild was concealing in that mountain location. The instant the opening was made, he sprinted through the barrier and eagerly surveyed the compound. Jin-yuk stopped abruptly and materialized his reliable bat, only to be confronted by a strange view. The base's internal appearance was completely different from its external look. The barrier must have been imbued with a distortion illusion. His immediate priority was to locate the entrance to the massive camp. After several minutes of moving around unchallenged, he noted the surprising scarcity of guards. The first one he eventually saw was positioned near the barrier, apparently protecting an entrance. Jin-yuk reasoned that the presence of a guard implied there was something important nearby that required protection. This was Jin-yuk's most promising lead so far. He launched himself into the air and raised his bat, channeling his immense strength into the preparatory motion. Jin-yuk swung the weapon, and to his great surprise, the guard standing by dissipated into smoke as the bat struck the ground. It was revealed to be an illusion, not a real person. He had intended to knock out a guard for capture and interrogation to gain access, but now he was left to figure out the entry method on his own. Much to his astonishment, this supposedly secure facility was equipped with automatic doors, similar to a supermarket. The security measures were laughably inadequate, and it did not even appear that they had CCTVs in operation. They must have been operating under the assumption that the women they had taken had no chance of escape. Just to ensure he would not be deceived, Jin-yuk retrieved an insurance policy from his inventory. He pulled out an EMP generator, crafted from the materials of electric-type monsters, and casually placed it on the floor. This device would disable any communications or security equipment in the immediate vicinity. This precaution was the reason he had left the magic communication crystal with Lucia. As soon as the EMP activated, Jin-yuk formulated his next steps. With the entire compound offline, it was time to commence his real mission. From a distance, the masked man maintained his close observation of Jin-yuk. He was beginning to connect the young man's involvement with both the bar incident and the Titan Guild. Just like the others, the masked man appeared to have his own secret motivations, and Jin-yuk was a critical component in ensuring their success. As a direct result of the EMP Jin-yuk had activated, one of the idle guards at the facility watched his game abruptly stop as his phone lost power. The guard grumbled, blaming the remote, rural location for interfering with his gaming. By the time he finally sensed that something was wrong, a red bat was already smashing mercilessly into the side of his face. Jinyuk had not even swung the bat. He had actually thrown his weapon, impaling the man with the blunt end. After confirming the guard was incapacitated, he used auto-recovery to recall his weapon. Jinyuk had finally located someone of flesh and blood to fight. The guard's blood sprayed onto a nearby wall as his body hit the smooth concrete floor with a thud. The man he had just killed was not a hunter, just an ordinary person, yet he possessed an astoundingly high karma level of 800 hanging over his head. This place was, without a doubt, filled with vile, inhuman trash. Jinyuk now felt he could wipe out everyone involved in this operation without any hesitation. Upon proceeding through the locked gate, he was met with the sight of a long hallway lined with prison doors. This had to be the location where they were holding all the abducted women. The living conditions within each visible cell were abysmal. The women were shackled like animals, awaiting their turn to be sacrificed as material for the cursed elixir. Jinyuk's reflections were broken by a male voice inquiring about his identity. A particular cell in the row was an exception. It held a man instead of a woman. Jinyuk identified the man's attire as the uniform belonging to the Tyrant Guild. The captive man urged Jinyuk to flee before it was too late, claiming that everyone in the facility had lost their sanity. Externally, the disreputable team leader checked his watch, monitoring the duration of Jinyuk's infiltration. A significant amount of time had passed since Jinyuk entered, yet everything remained silent. He considered that it might be time for the main contingent to advance. Yong-sik commanded his men to move forward and take positions near the facility, prepared to enter if any unusual activity occurred. Upon his signal, the Titan members surged ahead in their black jackets. Lucia, however, remained stationary, seemingly indifferent. Yong-sik was unable to comprehend her behavior. The executive eventually joined his troops to wait, while Jinyuk handled the difficult tasks within. Lucia contemplated whether it was time for her to act. Prior to the operation, Jinyuk had insisted on managing the situation inside the building by himself. Her assigned role was to closely observe the Titan members on the outside. They were still uncertain of what Han Yong-sik might attempt, requiring Lucia to remain alert. Jinyuk had advised her against becoming overly involved, but such passivity was not in her nature. Returning to the facility's interior, the imprisoned man identified himself as young Dae-yoon. Jinyuk asked why a Tyrant Guild member was in such a pitiful condition. Dae-yoon admitted he was incarcerated for an attempt to kill a high-ranking member. They were currently keeping him alive only because of his valuable expertise in illusion skills. The distortion illusion on the barrier and the illusory guard must have been his creations. Jinyuk was intrigued as to why this man would try to sabotage his own guild's research. The reason was straightforward. Dae-yoon could no longer tolerate witnessing his colleagues use women as bait for monsters. He had reached his breaking point and attempted to eliminate the individual in charge, but he was captured and imprisoned. Jinyuk was pleased to find a Tyrant Guild member with such a moral compass. Even Dae-yoon's karma score was low, registering at only 62. Jinyuk extended a formal invitation to Dae-yoon to collaborate with him in dismantling the malevolent facility. Concurrently, the operative responsible for surveillance in the control room was fast asleep in his comfortable office chair. When he finally awoke, he understood that he must have fallen asleep while on duty yet again. He regularly became drowsy around this time, so this was not an unusual event. And since the facility was always uneventful, he deemed it acceptable. However, rather than seeing the expected live surveillance feeds of the facility, he awoke to find all the monitors were black. He looked around the room in an attempt to understand the situation, but he found no immediate explanation. In a state of panic, he attempted to restart the system, but the core issue was that the power source had been disabled by Jinyuk's EMP. Every single electronic item, including smartphones, was rendered inoperable. The entire computer system was offline, and he had slept through the failure. The control room operator was hardly a candidate for Employee of the Month. Just outside the command center, a few of the Tyrant Guild members were playing cards to alleviate their boredom. They were enjoying their game until the control room operator began shouting about an emergency. The Tyrant members were alarmed, and most of all, annoyed that their game had been interrupted. The operator informed everyone that the entire system was completely non-functional. Compounding the problem, all the women had vanished from their prison cells. An intruder was present and had thrown the entire facility into disarray. The leader of the members divided their forces into two teams. The first team was directed to the Elan production room, while the second team was tasked with finding the intruder and the missing women. As for the operator who had allowed the situation to occur, he was ordered to find any possible way to contact their headquarters. Every prison cell had been unlocked, liberating the abducted women. They were currently heading for the closest exit, their lives hanging in the balance. Dae-yoon, being familiar with the facility's layout, guided everyone along the most efficient escape route. They had come very close to the exit, yet remained far from safety as the Tyrant Guild members intercepted their path. Upon the discovery of the escaping women, the Tyrant members began to swarm the location. The first guard to arrive immediately identified Dae-yoon, who was directing the women toward the exit. Dae-yoon ensured the women passed him and then remained behind to create a diversion, buying them more time to get away. The first Tyrant member, overly eager, charged in alone, intent on killing Dae-yoon permanently. The moment the punch connected, Dae-yoon reminded his former colleague of his specialization, illusion. The Tyrant member struggled to control his rage at having been deceived by such a basic tactic. While the second team was preoccupied with chasing Dae-yoon and the women, the first team was experiencing a far more agonizing destiny. Each of the Tyrant members was inadequately armed, bringing only knives to confront an opponent with a baseball bat. Jin-yuk made short work of the team that had been assigned to guard the Elan production room. He utilized his superior technique and footwork to easily outmaneuver and ridicule the half-trained fighters. The young man struck each of their heads, needing just one swing for each person. Jin-yuk defeated the last Tyrant member without even exerting himself. Observing how desperately these men had been protecting the gate, it was clear that Elan was located behind the door. Jin-yuk gained entry to the room and proceeded inside cautiously. He scanned the area and saw all the equipment that the Tyrant organization had collected to produce the inhumane drug. They had gone so far as to build a massive laboratory underground for security. The lab was filled with human-sized test tubes, and each one contained a woman abducted by the Tyrant Guild. Witnessing the scale of their malevolent operation firsthand was even more revolting than Jin-yuk had imagined. In the center of the laboratory was a monster held within protective glass. This creature had to be Elan, the source of all this suffering and evil. Jin-yuk gripped his bat tightly. The monster showed no reaction to his presence. It was entirely possible that it was dormant. With a smile, the young man summoned the lightning contained within his weapon and adopted a batting stance. If all went well, he could potentially end this threat permanently, but that seemed too straightforward. Elan must have perceived the danger and awakened. The creature shattered its protective glass enclosure and launched its tentacles forward ferociously. Jin-yuk was forced to move and dodge rapidly as the fast-moving appendages aimed for his vital points. His intended lightning attack had to be cancelled. He observed the movement of the tentacles and his fear increased. Considering how heavy and fast those limbs attacked, he knew that if he were struck in a critical spot, it would be over for him. For now, his only course of action was to remain on the defensive, waiting and hoping for an opening to attack. Jin-yuk forced himself to concentrate. He had to remain calm if he wished to survive unharmed. Elan's appearance was grotesque, resembling a frenzied entity with tentacles. Finally, the creature completely broke free of its glass containment, scattering thousands of sharp shards in every direction. It was beginning to look as if Jin-yuk was totally outmatched this time. Jin-yuk activated his hard-skin skill, providing himself with extra protection. He quickly dodged an incoming attack and pushed forward, determined to finish the fight. However, a powerful blow nearly shattered his defense, making him realize just how strong his opponent was. After the impact, he steadied himself and prepared for his next move. Jin-yuk's adversary is not proving easy to defeat, so he knows he must fight with even greater intensity. With renewed concentration, Jin-yuk delivers a final, determined attack, resolved to destroy the monster known for devouring people. He just barely manages to take care of the creature. As he surveys the area, he spots a peculiar item, Al-Raune's magic stone. Examining it, he finds that it cannot be appraised, but its size and form resemble a typical magic stone. Deciding to seek answers later, he plans to consult the dwarf about it. Jin-yuk then wonders if he should check on the events unfolding outside. He contacts Lucia via the communication crystal, asking if she can hear him clearly and how things are progressing on her end. He specifically wants to know if the women succeeded in escaping safely. Lucia responds, detailing that a man and the girls have made their way down the mountain. However, she notes that the individuals pursuing them are dressed identically, which she finds suspicious. Jin-yuk clarifies that the man leading the women, was previously captured for betraying the Tyrant Guild, but now seems trustworthy. He explains that they decided to cooperate, and that the man is now their ally. Jin-yuk reassures her, and confirms that they are on the same side. Now that the situation is clearer, Lucia asks about a more critical matter, checking if Al-Raune has been dealt with. Jin-yuk reassures her that Al-Raune has been properly handled, and that he has also retrieved the magic stone. Kang Jin-hyuk, still focused on the external situation, inquires about the people chasing the women. Lucia explains that those groups have been engaged in combat for a while. As soon as individuals in white clothing appeared, the Titan group immediately rushed to fight them. However, she observes that something about the battle seems unusual. She notes that the ones in white consumed something, and subsequently their appearance changed. Now the Titans, who initially held the advantage, are beginning to struggle. Jin-yuk wonders if this strange transformation is connected to what was mentioned earlier, Al-Raune's drug. Recognizing the danger, Jin-yuk knows it will be a significant problem if the Titan Guild collapses at this moment. Despite his personal annoyance with the Titan members, he understands that stopping the Tyrant Guild is the highest priority. He asks Lucia if she can provide assistance in the fight to prevent things from getting worse. Lucia understands the request and agrees to take care of the white-clad enemies. She assures Jin-yuk that he can count on her, but in exchange, she demands a large supply of sweets as her reward. Meanwhile, Jin-yuk senses that everything on Lucia's side is falling into place. Confident that the battle is approaching its conclusion, he calls out to someone hiding nearby, referring to them as Mr. Delivery Man. A mysterious figure steps forward, surprised that Kang Jin-hyuk had noticed his presence. Jin-yuk, in turn, wonders if this individual's target is him, or if the man is also after Al-Raune's magic stone. The masked man reveals, however, that while his objective was initially identical, it has since been altered. Kang Jin-hyuk advises him that he is going to regret the decision he just made. When they begin to fight, the adversary is stunned by Jin-yuk's incredible reaction speed, a capability far exceeding that of a typical C-rank hunter. The assailant remembers the instance when Jin-yuk deflected the poison darts, questioning if that successful block was purely a matter of luck. Despite his misgivings, he convinces himself that ultimately, the person he is facing is only a C-rank hunter. He activates his special ability, making preparations to eliminate Jin-yuk. However, in the midst of his assault, he notices something he did not anticipate. Jin-yuk is protected by armor. Following this realization, the man attempts to withdraw, but before he can escape, he feels a powerful force halting his movement. Jin-yuk has no intention of letting him get away this time. The opponent just barely succeeds in blocking the subsequent attack. Doubt begins to surface as he recognizes that Jin-yuk is significantly more powerful than he had first assumed. Frustrated and unable to accept his defeat, the man shouts, vowing to get his revenge. Jin-yuk, however, counters that there will be no future opportunity, asserting that this location will be the man's grave. With the immediate threats neutralized, attention turns toward the injured, making their safety the new priority. In the meantime, a report of the situation is required. The revelation that the Tyrant Guild was manufacturing hidden drugs is received with shock. Without the unforeseen assistance from the unknown woman, survival would not have been possible. Her projectiles possessed a force almost equivalent to an S-rank hunter, yet no recorded female hunter has demonstrated such power. Now that the situation is stabilized, the wounded are transported to the hospital, and all recoverable evidence is secured. With the tyrant forces seemingly managed, the focus shifts to concluding the operation properly. Yet, before they can continue, an individual arrives, breathing hard, and delivers an urgent message. This person reveals that the leader of the Tyrant Guild, along with their most powerful members, is en route to their location. The specific mention of Cho-won Cheol, an S-rank hunter, makes it obvious that remaining there would be a disastrous error. The executive with glasses becomes frustrated, realizing they must withdraw just when they were on the verge of victory. Abruptly, they get an urgent communication. A small contingent of Tyrant Guild members is reportedly advancing rapidly, probably serving as the vanguard. The warning was accurate. Danger is approaching quickly. The enemy is closing in, leaving them no option but to terminate the mission. Consequently, the decision is swiftly made that everyone must evacuate at once, ensuring they escape without delay. One individual elects to remain, knowing that vanishing with the others might arouse suspicion. Staying behind will assist in creating an alibi and deflecting the blame onto another party. A fabricated report will be submitted to imply that someone else was responsible for the events. The primary objective is to prevent a direct confrontation between the Titan and Tyrant guilds. After deliberation, the group, the Titan members, decides to assign all responsibility to Hunter Kang Jin-hyuk, who remains inside the facility. This narrative seems to be the optimal method for concealing their involvement and departing undetected. Concerns arise regarding the trustworthiness of the traitor, as misleading the Tyrant Guild will be a difficult task. The true goal, however, is not deception, but rather securing a sufficient amount of time. This acquired time will be used to prepare for the inevitable war. When the truth is eventually revealed, they will possess the justification for their actions. This moment presents the perfect opportunity to launch an attack and completely eliminate the enemy. Following this, Lucia asks if the individual standing there, the defeated pursuer, is the person Kang Jin-hyuk had referred to. There is no time to waste. Kang Jin-hyuk is waiting inside. Everything is progressing more smoothly than they had anticipated. Upon arriving at their destination, Jin-hyuk promptly provides his companions with the latest reports, confirming that he has neutralized the pursuer. When asked about the current situation, he clarifies that Al-Rauni is deceased. However, another issue needs to be addressed. He requests assistance in arranging the scene to make it appear as though the body before them had died during the fight against Al-Rauni. The real reason for this plan quickly becomes clear. A document is handed over, and they are urged to look at it closely. As they read the contents, shock spreads among them. The names listed belong to recent victims in a series of brutal murders. If this information is accurate, the implications are terrifying. The infamous Great Guild Killer has historically targeted large guilds. This situation provides an opportunity. If the blame for the events is shifted to this notorious killer, no one will suspect any other cause. Kang Jin-hyuk shares his plan and asks Jung Dae-yoon if he can make it happen. Jung Dae-yoon agrees, recognizing the brilliance of the idea. Lucia, still not fully understanding the implications, seeks reassurance that this plan will not lead to unintended consequences. Kang Jin-hyuk assures them that everything is under control. With the decision made, the next priority is to leave the area quickly. The Tyrant Guild's main forces are expected to arrive soon, but not everything is as it appears. While half of what was reported about their arrival was true, the forces are indeed on their way. They will not reach the location for at least 2 more hours. The group they had seen approaching earlier was nothing more than an illusion. Jung Dae-yoon praises Jin-hyuk and thanks him for the rescue efforts that saved so many lives. Jin-hyuk, however, states that thanks are not necessary. The real battle is only just beginning. Moreover, the Tyrant Guild has suffered a serious setback, and when word of this spreads, other guilds are not likely to stay silent. Jin-hyuk looks forward to witnessing how the Tyrant Guild crumbles. The organization's downfall seems closer than ever. Their hidden crimes are far worse than anyone expected, making it necessary to involve higher authorities. To prevent being directly drawn into a guild war, the information must be sent anonymously to the Hunter Association, the police, the government, and the media. Some express apprehension that disclosing everything will ultimately just benefit other guilds, but the consensus is that protecting innocent individuals is more important than achieving a short-term tactical advantage. Soon, the shocking truth disseminates widely. A powerful hunter guild has been covertly cultivating monsters and utilizing humans as a food source. The public is horrified by the revelation, and officials declare the acts a major crime, promising a comprehensive investigation. Major guilds come forward, pledging their complete cooperation to uncover the full extent of these offenses. The Tyrant Guild, however, refuses to cooperate with the investigation in any capacity. The scene then shifts to Young Si-ok, who is extremely agitated after witnessing the information go viral. As if on cue, the Titan Guildmaster, Seo Sang-ho, contacts him. The bleach-haired executive immediately begins to berate the Titan Guildmaster for leaking the information for public consumption. The frustration is apparent. Despite all their efforts, another guild, Titan, is now being celebrated as the hero for exposing the truth. Jung Si-ok argues that keeping the information private would have permitted the Tyrant Guild to retaliate before anyone could organize against them. Han Jung Si-ok insists that if they had successfully recruited an S-class hunter, it would have ensured their victory over the Tyrant Guild. On the other side, Seo Sang-ho remains skeptical, pointing out that even with such a powerful ally, defeating the Tyrant Guild's master was never a certainty. The debate regarding the guild war continues. Han Young-seok believes they can simply take over the Tyrant Guild without worrying about collateral damage. Conversely, Seo Sang-ho argues that innocent people could suffer, which makes the proposition too dangerous. Afterward, Han Young-seok is questioned about his genuine intentions. A guild's function is to protect citizens, not just to accumulate more power. He insists he only wanted what was best. Moreover, he realizes that the guild leader consistently dismisses his strategies. He comes to the conclusion that the Titan Guild has no future under its current leadership and is, in fact, heading toward ruin. This is the moment the executive contacts a specific individual and promises them a position within the guild, provided they assist in overthrowing the current Titan Guild master. The perspective then shifts to Jin-yuk, who is about to have a clandestine conversation. The meeting location seems strange for a secret discussion, but Jung Dae-yoon arrives as planned. Kang Jin-hyuk greets him, observing that Dae-yoon appears more confident. The plan seems to be proceeding well, and the lies fabricated earlier have eased the situation within the Tyrant Guild. Despite this, the situation is not yet completely safe. The Tyrant Guild is reportedly organizing a team to track down Kang Jin-hyuk. Considering the guild's current unstable state, it seems odd that they possess the resources for this. However, some of the higher-ranking members have started to question the recent events. The news about the discovery of the murderers, the pursuer's body, spread with unusual speed, causing them to suspect that there might be a different, real culprit. Although there is no proof yet, doubts are starting to form. Since the plan worked, there is no immediate risk of Jin-yuk's identity being revealed, but remaining cautious is still necessary. For the time being, it is best for him to maintain a low profile until the Tyrant Guild collapses completely. Following their discussion, Jung Dae-yoon provides details regarding the individuals heading the investigation and inquires if Kang Jin-hyuk wishes to review the information. This seems unnecessary, however, as Jin-yuk is aware they are all simply illusions, a fact he had discerned from the beginning. With no one else present, he desires to know the identities of his actual pursuers. He is informed they are an archer and a mage, both highly skilled in disguise and concealment magic. It is possible they might even try to get close to him by impersonating someone familiar. After validating these details, one additional piece of information is shared. The person mentions a device called the Monster Counter. Kang Jin-hyuk remembers this being utilized during his earlier assistance to the Titan Guild, but this particular version appears different. It is revealed to be an upgraded model, an improvement on the original device. In the wake of the Al Raune incident, the association has created a new system to supervise hunters. Every hunter, beginning with the guilds, will be mandated to wear one, placing them all under the association's direct observation. This could make even hunting within dungeons challenging. If Kang Jin-hyuk intends to use the elixir to increase his strength, he must do so before this monitoring system is fully operational. Any power increase after the system's implementation will be flagged by the association, and it might even cause the Tyrant Guild to become suspicious of him. To prevent unwanted scrutiny, he must finish this process swiftly. The introduction of such a surveillance system was unforeseen, but he is left with no alternative. His main priority is to enhance his strength, even if just by a small amount. Wasting no time, he resolves to go directly to the dungeon. Inside the dungeon, the dwarf is irate at Jin-yuk for the extended absence. He had dispatched Jin-yuk to acquire ore, but the young man had disappeared completely. Now he has suddenly reappeared, bringing something unanticipated. Jin-yuk, in an apologetic manner, explains that unavoidable circumstances led to the delay. His return after weeks of no contact, seemingly as if nothing was amiss, clearly frustrates the dwarf. Jin-yuk offers a quick apology, attempting to convey that he had important matters to attend to, but this explanation does not alter the dwarf's disposition. The object Jin-yuk brought was not an ordinary material. It was a cursed item, saturated with the grudges of many souls. Dwarves, being sensitive to curses, would refuse to even approach it. Lucia had departed previously, stating she had an urgent task. It now appeared her departure was related to this item. Instead of delivering the requested ore, Jin-yuk had come back with something utterly useless. The dwarf immediately instructed him to dispose of it. Panicked, Jin-yuk insisted he was unaware of the item's nature, but this excuse was irrelevant. The error was already made. Still, discarding the item felt wasteful. He believed there had to be an alternative use for it, which left only one possible course of action. Furthermore, Lucia's earlier comment suddenly became clear. She had implied that the dwarf would be incapable of handling the item Jinyuk was bringing. It was now obvious why she had made that statement. A specific location existed beneath the cliff Jinyuk had previously visited, a place identified as the Temple of the Dragon. He was given a key along with instructions to unlock this temple and cleanse the curse from the ore. Success in this endeavor would result in a weapon even more potent than his current one being crafted as a reward. A question remained about whether the key would genuinely open the temple. The answer was affirmative, but it was accompanied by a grave warning that this location was not a typical temple. It was described as significantly more dangerous than any dungeon he had encountered previously. Entering without sufficient preparation would be excessively risky. A decision was made to depart for the time being. Regardless of how far they had already journeyed, safety was the higher priority. Kang Jin-hyuk observed Lucia accelerating ahead, acknowledging how fast she was. As he deliberated on preparations for the impending challenge, only potions and scrolls occurred to him, but he felt that these items might not be adequate. Before he had a chance to ask Lucia for advice, he noticed his food reserves dwindling and found her consuming provisions intended to last for a month. Before he could react to this, a phone call interrupted. Secretary Lee Haina from the Titan Guild was urgently requesting his help, specifically mentioning the guild master, Sang Ho. Her desperate tone made Jinyuk curious about what might have occurred. Afterward, Kang Jin-hyuk sped to the location, spurred by the urgency in Lee Haina's voice. Upon arriving, he found Sang Ho in a critical state, covered in blood and barely conscious. Lee Haina was desperately trying to reassure him. Jinyuk, knowing there was no time to lose, quickly moved to administer first aid. He poured a potion onto the wound, mitigating some of the damage. Although the immediate danger seemed to have passed, he needed information. Looking at the wounded man and the shaken secretary, he wondered what precisely had taken place to cause such a vicious attack. Sang Ho struggled to articulate. He explained that it was an ambush set by his own guild members. He had attended a guild event after returning home, expecting a standard gathering. However, he sensed something was wrong when he realized only Han Young-seok's faction was present. Before he could respond, it was too late. The drinks had been tainted with poison. His body weakened rapidly, but he forced himself to fight, using all his remaining strength to escape. Even so, he barely survived, collapsing from his injuries. Jinyuk listened closely. Even with poison in his system, regular guild members should not have been strong enough to overpower Sang Ho. He wondered what other factors had been at play. Before he could ask, Sang Ho trembled in pain. Moreover, Sang Ho's condition worsened as the wounds that the potion had started to heal began reopening. The poison from the event must have been far more potent than expected. Jinyuk quickly understood they needed to act fast. He asked if anyone knew the exact type of poison or if an antidote existed. Hyuna hesitated, explaining that standard hunter antidotes would be ineffective in this situation. Subsequently, Jinyuk suggested taking him to a hospital that specialized in hunters, but Sang Ho reminded them that going to a hospital would only compromise their location, allowing their enemies to find them immediately. Jinyuk considered their options and suddenly asked Hyuna if she had a car. She was confused about where they intended to go. He instructed her to prepare for immediate departure. They were going to his home. She was surprised and questioned if he had an antidote there. Jinyuk reassured her that he did not, but he might possess an alternative method for treating the poison. Hyuna quickly consented and rushed to get ready, determined to drive as fast as possible, while Jinyuk remained behind to keep watch over Sang Ho. As they approached their intended location, Jin-hyuk encourages Sang Ho to remain conscious and persevere for a short while longer. Hyuna abruptly observes something troubling. She asks if Jin-hyuk has noticed the vehicle tailing them. Subsequently, Jin-hyuk quickly looks back and recognizes it as the same car they had seen previously outside the house. Hyuna confirms his suspicion. They are being pursued. Jin-hyuk understands that he cannot lead their follower directly to his home. Left with no alternative, he opts to alter their course. He instructs Hyuna to follow his directions precisely and to take an alternate path. When they get to a particular location, Jin-hyuk readies himself to face Kang Jun-tae. He tells Hyuna to drive directly to his apartment while he remains behind to manage the pursuer. His colleague has already been notified and will grant Hyuna entry when she gets there. Kang Jun-tae, who is anticipating an encounter with Seo Sang-ho, is surprised to find an unknown individual blocking his path instead. He further questions whether Jin-hyuk genuinely plans to stop him single-handedly. Meanwhile, Jin-hyuk observes him intently, questioning if this man is the only one tracking them or if there are others. Afterward, Jinyuk notices Hyuna is not proceeding to the house as instructed and wonders why. Before he can inquire, she suddenly yells for him to flee at all costs, and then she discloses the terrifying reality. The man pursuing them is an S-class hunter. Jinyuk is stunned when he hears the name Kang Jun-tae. His presence detection ability activates, verifying the man's immense power. The force of Kang Jun-tae's aura radiates across the vicinity, making it apparent that he is not a common adversary. Jinyuk struggles to maintain his footing under the pressure. Hyuna asks if he is all right, but he can barely answer, aware that he cannot withstand this for long. He implores her to get away immediately, assuring her he will find a method to rendezvous later. Hyuna is reluctant to abandon him, but he is insistent. Acknowledging the extreme danger, she finally complies and speeds away. However, Kang Jun-tae is not willing to let his target get away so easily. He moves to cut them off, determined to stop their escape. Jinyuk intercepts him once more, which visibly frustrates the S-class hunter. Jun-tae questions why this man continually obstructs his objectives. Jinyuk does everything in his power to stall for time. Hyuna is now at a secure distance, hoping Jinyuk will make it out alive. Jinyuk, moreover, understands the severity of the confrontation. Kang Jun-tae, clearly irritated, asks why someone like Jinyuk is getting involved and advises him to step aside if he wishes to live, stating he is too occupied to be bothered with distractions. Jinyuk refuses to retreat. He wonders if Jun-tae genuinely thought he would just flee in terror. Before Jinyuk can respond, Jun-tae moves with incredible speed. Each of his attacks is not only swift, but also dangerously potent. Every strike forces Jinyuk into a desperate dodge, as he knows that even one successful hit could be fatal. Subsequently, Jun-tae mocks Jinyuk, keen to discover the extent of his endurance. Jun-tae's assaults intensify, and Jinyuk understands that a direct blow would be fatal. Reacting swiftly, Jinyuk accesses his inventory and dons his mithril chainmail. The armor's special property activates instantly, mitigating both physical and magical damage by 50%. When the following strike lands, Jinyuk recognizes how near to death he was. He would not have withstood that last attack without the armor he had equipped. Jun-tae watches him, remarking internally that he had not anticipated Seo Sang-ho having such a capable subordinate. Then, a realization strikes Jun-tae. He speculates that Jinyuk might be the C-class hunter who was rumored to have captured a new monster type. The name seems familiar. Jun-tae recalls Han Young-seok previously mentioning a similar individual who was closely associated with Seo Sang-ho. Following this, Jinyuk quickly grasps that his identity is no longer a secret. He knows that even if he successfully flees, his enemies will eventually locate him. His home will not be a sanctuary for much longer. Before he can dwell on it, he doubts his ability to escape from an opponent as formidable as Jun-tae. Subsequently, Jun-tae presents an unforeseen proposal. He tells Jinyuk to abandon Seo Sang-ho and align with him instead, stating that the new Titan Guild requires someone with his abilities. Jinyuk refuses the proposition, remaining resolute in his decision. The scene shifts to Lucia, who is exerting all her effort to heal the guildmaster. She reaches her limit, understanding she cannot continue the treatment at that moment. She steps away, considering if it would be better to go outside to confer on the situation. The toxin in Seo Sang-ho's system is still dangerously potent. While Lucia has implemented temporary measures to allow him to rest, it is evident the treatment is incomplete. His pain is alleviated for the time being, but this relief will not be long-lasting. Lehigh Na grows more worried, asking what their next move should be and if any other treatment method exists. Lucia reflects for a moment before remembering an individual who could possibly assist, the short man. She believes that if anyone can provide a solution, it is likely him. A different problem exists, however. Accessing the dungeon where the potential cure is located requires Jinyuk's presence. A potential path forward exists, but it will not be simple. Back in the battle, Jinyuk finds it difficult to maintain his defense. His adversary attacks relentlessly, giving him no opportunity to recover. Each blow impacts him heavily, and the energy he possessed at the beginning of the fight is rapidly diminishing. Furthermore, he is aware he has reached his physical limit and that consuming a potion would be beneficial. Yet, there is no opening to do so due to the unceasing attacks. Only one option remains. He must commit everything to a single final strike. Resolute, he refuses to surrender. If this is to be his end, he will ensure it is a meaningful one. Marshaling his last reserves of strength, he readies himself for one final desperate assault. Regardless of how hard he attempts to strike, his attacks consistently fail to connect. Jinyuk's frustration mounts, but Kang Juntai is not impressed, labeling the confrontation as boring. A lethal attack suddenly advanced toward Jinyuk. He knew he was required to dodge, but his body failed to comply, resulting in him taking the hit. Panic immediately set in as he desperately tried to force himself to react. His mind screamed for his body to move, yet he remained immobilized. At the very last second, his instincts took control, and he managed to shift just enough to avoid a fatal blow. Kang Juntae acknowledged the quick movement, impressed that Jinyuk had managed to survive. The offer to join forces and live was presented once more. Jinyuk refused, and Kang Juntae concluded that no other option remained. The final attack was about to be delivered, and Jinyuk wondered if this was truly his end. Just then, an arrow flew through the air, interrupting the confrontation. Lucia had arrived. To explain her appearance, Lucia was moving rapidly, following the path she had memorized. Despite this being her first time on this route, she pressed onward without hesitation. Every step brought her closer, and she hoped she was not too late. Furthermore, she silently prayed for Jinyuk to hold on. He just needed to survive a little longer. Meanwhile, the battle was still in progress. Kang Juntai prepared to finish the fight, but before the concluding strike could land, an arrow cut through the air. The unexpected attack forced him to step back. He looked at the arrow in disbelief, noting the immense power it carried.
Jinyuk, who was struggling to stay conscious, recognized the arrow immediately. Lucia had arrived just in time to save Jinyuk, surprising their enemy with her strength. The S-class hunter initially underestimated her, believing she was not a genuine threat, but he quickly realized his misjudgment when she easily blocked his subsequent attack. Shocked by her power, Kang Juntae struggled to comprehend how she was able to match him.
Lucia, conversely, remained focused, knowing this was not the time for instruction. She needed to conclude the fight quickly. Lucia proceeded to break the enemy's spear with her bare hands, leaving him in shock. He struggled to understand how he was being pushed back so easily. The thought occurred to him that she might be an S-class hunter from another country, as he was certain he would have known if such a powerful hunter was operating in the area. Jinyuk, still recovering, was equally stunned by her display of strength. Afterward, Lucia observed that Jinyuk was able to move and gave him a choice, asking whether she should finish their opponent, or if they should leave it at this. Jinyuk advised her that there was no need for her to get further involved. Kang Juntai, however, refused to acknowledge defeat. He realized nonetheless that continuing the fight would only bring unnecessary risk, so he agreed to stop for the moment, though he masked this decision with arrogance. Following this, Lucia teased him, but he remained firm, stating that he would remember this day. Before leaving, he issued a final warning, declaring that the next time they met, both she and Jinyuk would face their demise. With that, he disappeared.